Chapter 30.2. Just then, the leaf inside of Haruki's hand moved. He instinctively pointed his long knife at the plant. However, the potato did not attack. Of course, it didn't. It was so weak that it might as well have been waiting to die. However, the leaf was moving as if it were trying to convey something to him. What the leaf was pointing to was Haruki's bag. My bag? He wasn't sure, but Haruki was desperate for any kind of lead, and so he picked up the bag from the corner of the room and looked inside. Inside, there were 3 potatoes that had fallen off of the roots and a pot that contained potato stones. He didn't see how they could help him keep the monsters alive. Maybe it was just me. Just as he started to give up, the monster used the last of its strength to stretch itself out and grab one of the potato stones from the bag. Before he knew it, the monster had buried the stone in the soil. Huh? What? He didn't understand. What did the monster want to do? Haruki was confused by this mysterious act. However, at the same time, he observed that the monster's stalk was starting to regain its freshness. Huh? But how? It was just one potato stone. However, Haruki then thought about where they had come from. Potato stones were throwing items that the boss was supposed to have made as a hobby. But what if the boss power was inside of the stones? That's ridiculous. It was quite the leap. Indeed, the only possibility he could think of was that this was an item from the dungeon. It was made in the dungeon. In other words, maybe it had properties similar to the dungeon dirt. If that was true, it would make sense why these monsters that were raised in the dungeon would suddenly recover after touching it. Well, it was more believable than his first theory. In other words, it wants nutrients from the dungeon. He found himself muttering his idea out loud. However, the monster reacted to this. The leaves seemed to sway as if it was nodding. Yes, yes. Ah, can you understand me? Again, the monster nodded. It was not particularly rare for monsters to be able to talk. Monsters that were demi-humans often spoke in human languages. Silver wolves communicated with others through variations in their howls. As for werewolves, they were intelligent enough that it would not have surprised him if they could talk, and so, monsters understanding human speech was nothing to be surprised about. That being said, this was a plant-type monster. Surely a plant wouldn't understand human speech. No, maybe it is possible. There were experiments performed in the past that proved that regularly professing your love to a plant would cause beautiful flowers to bloom, and continued words of hatred would make it wilt. It was still a little early to assume that this meant they could understand human speech, but you could at least say that they did react to it. Well, that was the case for plants on Earth, so it would not be too strange if the plants that had mutated in the dungeon would understand the human language. I'm sorry for suddenly taking you all of the way here by force. Seriously, the leaves seemed to say as it swayed in reply. Do you have a name? The leaves swayed. Okay, then I'll give you a name. What kind of name do you want? I'll leave it to you. However, I will accept nothing but the best name. Well, he didn't know if it actually said that, but the leaves moved up and down. A potato stalk. How about Jagger? Just as he said the name, the stalk swayed and smacked Haruki in the face. Apparently, it did not like that name. Haruki rubbed his nose and tried to think of something else. Potato, stalk, leaves, monster, Dungeon Ogre. He was smacked again. Stop thinking like that. The vines moved as if irritated. It was quite impressive how it moved. Haruki folded his arms and thought silently for a while. Alright, how about Rhea? It's from the goddess Rhea, who was worshipped on the island of Crete and ensured a good harvest. This was knowledge Haruki had pulled from his collection of myths, which happened to be one of his few hobbies. The potato leaves seemed to jump when it heard this name. What a great name. Oh, well, I suppose you must call me by it, Rhea seemed to say as its leaves folded. Rhea was great when it came to body language. It was as if Haruki could hear its voice. However, it wasn't actually saying anything, and so it might really have been Haruki's delusion. Was it like talking to a doll? It was too dark for him to laugh. There is a reason that I brought you here. It's because I want to mass-produce potatoes. Before Haruki could finish his request, Rhea started firing potatoes at him. Haruki tried to dodge them, but they were so slow that he ended up just catching them with his hands. When he felt them hit his palms, his eyebrows narrowed. Haruki looked down and saw the shriveled potato in his hand. Then Rhea used its leaves to hit the soil. The roots were now exposed, and along with the roots, were the shriveled potatoes. It's my fault that your body can't make potatoes anymore? So you want me to take responsibility for it? Rhea swung back and forth. The source of this content November L/N. It was like an angry woman beating on a man's chest. Haruki was speechless. No woman had ever said such words to him before, and so they cut him all the more deeply. To think that he would hear them from a plant. Haruki's hands hit the ground as he groaned. Apparently, the first person he had to take responsibility for was not a human, but a monster. Chapter 31.1. Another sponsored chapter. Got the donation about 5 minutes ago. Luckily I had a chapter in reserve. It's pretty large too. Enjoy. Cheers. Let's befriend the potato. It had now been an hour since they started hunting. Something bumped into Haruki's back just as he was about to move to the next area. Huh? New novel chapters are published on Karaboshi. Let's take a rest. You know, we can still go. Let's take a rest. Okay. Garen's smile had reminded Haruki of a demonic mask, and he seemed to shrink. Haruki had fainted the previous day while they were out hunting together, and so he had lost any trust that Karen might have had in him as far as controlling their hunting time went. Was the impact he had just felt actually magic? Could it have been friendly fire? She was suddenly making use of her abilities. Horrifying. It was the weakest attack possible. There was only a light impact and he felt no pain. That being said, magic was scary, and Karen was even scarier. Haruki sat down with his back to the wall. Then he brought up his skill board so that she wouldn't be able to see it, and then he touched the screen. To Karen, it would just like he was writing letters on the ground. While she looked a little sulky, it was fine as long as she didn't notice the skill board. Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill point, 3, Class, Swordsman. Vitality, Stamina 0-1. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 1. Agility. Quickness 1. Dexterity 1. Technique. Weapon Mastery. One-handed sword 1. Throwing 1. Light Armor 0. Conceal 1. Imitate 1. Haruki had hunted a lot at a rapid pace up until now. Thanks to that, his stamina had gone up by 1 point. However, in spite of all that hunting, his other skills had not gone up at all. Not only that, but light armor was still at a 0 in spite of a lot of attacks landing. It had only been half a week since he started using the skill board. Haruki didn't think that it would suddenly start going up. That being said, he expected it to go a little faster than this. For instance, the skill level strength that he initially imagined for the one-handed sword would be like this: 0 equals beginner, 1 equals slightly familiar, 2 equals first level of kendo. 5 equals professional, veteran. 10 equals god. Something like this. However, by this reasoning, Haruki was below the first level of kendo while also being able to beat a silver wolf. There were other elements to consider as well, of course, but it didn't quite make sense to him. Perhaps the rating of skills was more complicated than I had thought. He knew the technique-based skills had a max level of 10, but physical skills went up to 30. So he wanted it to rise faster. It was with such thoughts in his head that Haruki opened the intuition and special trees. And then, ? He nearly gasped out loud. Special, growth acceleration 3. Tame 0 new. What? Is it because he brought that thing back? There was no other explanation. The requirement was so clear that it left no room for doubt. He could imagine what it did, based on the name, but he read the explanation just to be sure. Tame 0, tame monsters. Relying on each other is the requirement. Max 5. Haruki relied on the potatoes that he would be able to get from Rhea, and Rhea would wilt without Haruki. Interesting. Indeed, what Haruki had done was taming. He had tamed a monster without even knowing it. And it wasn't even an animal type, but a plant type. Why am I always doing things that are unmemorable? Haruki thought as he held his head. Does that make me like a druid or an elf? It sounded a little cool if he thought of it like that. Still, taming a plant. No matter how he thought of it, it was very low profile. If only it had been a more eye-catching monster. However, he had already named it, and so Haruki decided to take care of Rhea. He had no intention of throwing it away, and since it was now at home in the planter, he would treat it as if it were a beloved child. They ended up killing 276 silver wolves in all. In spite of resting along the way, they had killed more than they did yesterday. The biggest reason for this was likely the fact that Haruki hadn't fallen asleep. He hoped to kill about 300 tomorrow. When he went to the store to sell the materials, Akane cried and shouted for him to have mercy. Yes, it was a good day. Karaboshi. The wolf meat that we got today, yeah, would you like to eat it together? Oh, sorry, I'm busy today as well. Haruki made a light-hearted apology and returned home with a spring in his step. Karen watched him and pouted. Did it start after the stampede? Haruki had completely stopped cooking for her. He used to cook without her even having to ask. Could it be? A terrible thought crossed her mind and a chill ran down her spine. Surely Karaboshi didn't have a girlfriend. Chapter 31.2. However, Karen had no direct way of finding out. How could she look at him in the face and ask, "Do you have a girlfriend?" She could never let such a horrible thing escape her lips. If she were to ask such a question and he replied with a, "Yes, I happen to be dating someone now," then she would faint. Karen thought for a long time about what she could do. When an idea did come to her, she put it into action immediately. If she followed it, she could reduce the possibility of being subjected to great damage. When he returned home, Ria was limp again. Ria, what happened? The reality was too cruel. Tears welled up in Haruki's eyes. New novel chapters are published on. He frantically ran up to Ria and touched the leaves. Ria's leaves were dehydrated and wrinkled. But, why? Perhaps Haruki's voice had wakened it because Ria moved weakly and pointed one of its leaves towards the soil. Water? Ria nodded. Indeed. The soil had been quite moist in the morning, but it was all dried up now. It was the beginning of summer. While it wasn't too hot yet, the sunlight was starting to get stronger. The planter was not able to hold much water, and so the sunlight that entered the room had quickly evaporated all the moisture. Damn it! He had not thought that far ahead. Haruki quickly pulled out a water bottle from his bag and poured the water on the soil. After he did this, the plant finally seemed to come back to life. Ria's body slowly rose as if taking a deep breath. Once the water was absorbed into all of the leaves, they began to smack Haruki's cheeks over and over again. "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time." "Really? I'm so sorry." "Seriously," Ria said as she folded her arms and pointed her nose away. That was close. He had nearly lost Ria just after he had decided to protect her. It made a chill go down his spine. Haruki got some water from the well and put it in a bucket which he placed next to the planter. Then he put a measuring cup inside and showed it to Ria. "Next time thirsty soil is dry, use this to add more water." "I see." Ria nodded slowly. Now she wouldn't collapse from dehydration. "Is there anything else that you want?" "Though, I don't know what it is that you eat." Ria twisted around and pointed a leaf at Haruki's bag. "The potato stone?" Ria's body shook. Then it moved its leaves towards the garage and swayed. "So you want items like the potato stone that can be found in the dungeon?" Ria nodded. Ria was quite advanced in terms of body language, and it was because of this that Haruki was able to understand her many demands. Or so he thought. Perhaps he was able to understand so much because of the tame skill. Still, this was quite impressive for level 0. Maybe he would actually be able to hear her voice if he maxed it out. "I know, Ria. I have some fertilizer I haven't used yet. Want to try it out?" Ria did not seem enthusiastic. It pained him to see the fertilizer go to waste since he had bought it with his own money. It was expensive, and so Haruki took out the bag and showed it to Ria. Then he started his presentation. After separating from Haruki, Karen had invaded his house. Maybe Haruki was now living with his new girlfriend. However, she just could not ask him directly. In that case, the solution was simple. She just needed to sneak in and watch. Yes, it was a bad thing. However, it would mean that she'd take less damage. Karen wanted to avoid the total collapse of her mental health. And once she got the idea, she could not stop. She took off her shoes and walked quietly on the floor. She could hear voices coming from the floor above her. It was Haruki's voice. She slowly climbed up the stairs and arrived at the room where Haruki's voice was coming from. Then she took in one deep breath. No matter what happened, she could not lose her cool. She would give up and leave quietly. Karen made this decision as she put her ear on the door. "But, just a little?" "Just a little bit." "Okay?" Karen was so shaken by the words that she was hearing, and she could bear it no longer. "An number." "Don't do it, Karaboshi." Just as Haruki had picked up the fertilizer, Karen stormed into the room with a red face. "Oh, number been discovered." What should he do? Haruki began to panic. She was going to start yelling at him. He tried to prepare for her outburst, but Karen just looked at him dumbly. What was happening? He couldn't tell what Karen was thinking. Haruki held the fertilizer, unable to move. Next to him, Ria was furious. Who was this woman? She was saying. Ria directed her thickest stem towards Karen and, wait. Ria, she is a team member. Don't attack her. Haruki frantically moved between them. There must have still been some inside of the ground. He could see the swell of the potatoes underneath. Had he been a split second late, a potato would have fired at her. But they were very wrinkled, so she probably wouldn't have been hurt. Karaboshi. Who is Ria? Oh, it's her name. Chapter 31.3. Is that a monster? Yes, I suppose. What? Why is there a monster here? Well, calm down, will you? Ria would get angry if Karen started to lose control, so he wanted her to be quiet. Haruki soothed her, and Karen took in a deep breath and sat down on the floor. Now, let's hear your excuses. Though, you'll be executed either way, came the voiceless voice. So, why is there a monster here? The truth is, I brought it from the dungeon. You did what? And then I planted it here. And it's going well. Why did you do that? Hey, it's because you told me that I could grow potatoes at home. I was talking about normal potatoes, not monsters. What? He had been depressed because he wasn't able to gather the monster's potatoes. And then she had suggested he grow them at home. Well, I understand your reason now, said Karen. But her face suggested that she didn't understand at all. But, it is a monster, right? What are you going to do if it attacks you? It's fine if it attacks me. But what if it attacks you when sleeping? It's still fine. Now that she's planted here, Ria isn't very lethal anymore. Not lethal anymore? Yes, sorry, Ria. If you don't mind, he said. And then Ria held out a potato, a little angrily. Bam! The potato hit the palm of his hand. But it didn't hurt at all. As you can see, the potatoes become all wrinkly when they are in the dungeon. Ria was not able to damage Haruki. Even if she hit a good spot, she might be able to make a small bruise at best. Haruki passed Karen the wrinkly potato, and she squeezed it several times to check its texture. She was narrowing her eyebrows, but there was also a suspicious light in her eyes. Apparently, she took a liking to the soft texture. I see. So it isn't lethal after all. But it's still a monster, you know? They are the enemies of mankind. Yes, but Ria is. Let's uproot it right now. Wait. Haruki held Karen as she was about to stand up. That wouldn't do. Her eyes were on the target. Behind Haruki, Ria understood that she was being threatened, and she turned her body as if to say, just you try. Hey, don't provoke her. It's true that Ria is a monster, but she's a good monster. But that doesn't look like a good monster to me. How could a stalk of potatoes look evil to you? Me suppose you are right. But it's still a monster. Karen. Haruki put his hands on Karen's shoulders and looked straight into her eyes. Uncertainty flashed in Karen's eyes, and a little color appeared on her cheeks. Splat. A potato hit Haruki in the back. Hey, Ria, stop butting in. He glared. HMPH. Ria turned her nose away. She may be a monster, but just like wolves and dogs, they can be man's best friend depending on how you treat them. But, alright then. What is the difference between the adventurers and monsters that are on the first floor of Chikaho? Karen grimaced and closed her mouth. On the first and second floors of Chikaho, adventurers surrounded monsters as soon as they popped, and then lynched them. It's not as if those monsters had killed their family or loved ones. While individual monsters may be guilty, their entire species were not. However, they were killed as if they were the enemies of the adventurers' parents. They would be hit even after they were dead. Carved, crushed. Who is the real monster? Almost every adventurer would ask that question upon first seeing that sight. Haruki had thought it. Karen must have as well. Of course, I'm not saying we should just leave all the monsters where they are. I do think we should defeat the ones we come across. But what I'm trying to say is, when determining whether something is an enemy, it's not their type, but how they are. Ria is unmistakably an ally. She didn't attack me even when I had my back towards her. See? But she did hit you in the back with a potato. How sharp. Karen was quick to find the smallest contradiction. Haruki scowled. Forget about that. It's just her way of showing affection. Nouvelle by N. As he said this, another potato hit him in the back. Huh? That one hurt a little? He glared back from the corner of his eye. That's not what it is. Ria insisted. Haruki had to laugh. It was funny. Very funny. See, Karen? How can you think that she is hostile? I suppose. But I don't know. I have a feeling that it has no tolerance for me. Like it sees me as a rival. arrival? Haruki tilted his head in puzzlement. It's because Ria is good with ranged attacks. Don't worry. More of a magic user, Karen. Ria specializes in physical potato attacks. And while Ria can shoot potatoes, she is unable to make new potatoes with her body. So you don't have to be jealous. That's true, but no, that's not what I meant. Oh, never mind. At least my worst fear didn't come true. Worst fear? Karen let out an exaggerated sigh. She wasn't sure why she was apprehensive. In any case, Haruki succeeded in making Karen overlook his foolishness. Chapter 32.1 Sponsored Jumbo Chapter. Let's all eat some delicious food. In the morning, he gathered water from the well and refilled the bucket next to Ria. Then he checked the condition of the dirt, even though Ria's leaves continued to smack him around, and then he opened the window so the room wouldn't get too warm. Is there anything else that you need? He asked, just in case. But Ria was just facing the sun as it rose from the horizon, and did not move. If she wasn't saying anything, it probably meant that she was alright, and so he was unlikely to fall into another tragic situation, where he came home and found her on the brink of death. Alright, see you later, Haruki said as he left the house. As he checked his equipment in front of the dungeon, he suddenly thought of something. When had he last said see you later to someone while leaving the house? Those words had not left his lips in a long time. Of course, it wasn't a particularly meaningful phrase, but he was still reminded about how nice it felt. After that, Karen joined him, and they headed for the 5th floor. Once they had hunted down over 300 silver wolves, Haruki visited Akane's store with an air of triumph. Novel by N. Com. However, Akane seemed to be in a bad mood today. She was usually smiling, but today, her eyebrows were furrowed. Had she eaten something bad? Even when he asked her to appraise the materials, he didn't feel like provoking her like he always did. It did not feel like the right time for it. How boring. Right. Do you do any maintenance work for weapons? Huh? You can't do it yourself? Well, I'm a beginner. Ah, that's true. If they were made of materials from the surface, they would wear away quickly. However, Haruki's weapons were made from dungeon materials, so they were quite durable. That being said, they weren't indestructible. Aside from the magic sword, the other weapons would lose their edge after repeated use, and the defensibility of his armor would decrease. Adventurers who had been working for a year or two would know how to do it themselves, or leave it to a party member who was especially skilled at it. However, Haruki was a newcomer. He had not learned how to maintain his weapons. I'll order some equipment so you can do it yourself next time. So, you can do it? Of course, I can do it. I happen to work at a store that sells weapons and armor. That's right. Sometimes I forget, and think that you just deal in materials. Not at all. As she didn't keep the products in her store, it was easy to forget. But she actually sold weapons and armor, so it was not surprising that she had such skills. Is there anything that you need to have repaired immediately? I don't think so, but would you mind taking a look, just in case? As Akane inspected his equipment, Haruki wondered to himself. Something was definitely strange. Akane was too normal today. She was working as an ordinary clerk. It was wrong. It was too strange. Was this a harbinger of a catastrophe? It should not be so strange for a clerk to do their job properly. However, this was Akane. She wasn't Akane if both her head and attitude were lacking in weight. Usually, if he suggested she only sold materials, her reaction would have been, I mainly sell weapons, but I can appraise materials as a bonus. Doesn't that make me perfect? And yet I'm still dealing with customers. You should have more respect for me. Or something like that. Basically, she always reacted with 3 times the force of whatever you hit her with. But today, it was just not at all. It was so wrong. From what I can see, your equipment seems fine. I mean, while they may be entry models, they wouldn't break in just a few weeks. That wouldn't be good, in terms of quality assurance. But the blade of your silver wolf dagger is getting a little dull. I'll order a whetstone for you first. Ah, right. She was so serious. Akane was serious. She was so serious that he felt a chill go down his spine. Maybe something really would happen. Maybe a lightning bolt would fall from the sky and strike him. Haruki seemed to be pleading to her with his eyes, but Akane did not respond. Yes, Haruki was looking at her, and she didn't even seem to notice. This was very, very bad. He gave some of the silver wolf meat to his neighbor, Mr. Kitora, 10 minutes away on foot. Mr. Kitora had fought in the defensive battle during the stampede. His muscles bulged from beneath his tank top as he happily accepted the meat. "Thank you for bringing me such delicious meat. I'll be able to harvest my field soon, so you can look forward to that." "No problem at all." Perhaps killing the monsters in the battle had helped raise his physical abilities, because the fields were much larger than they were last year. There was lettuce, radish, and turnips that were just waiting to be harvested. He could also see bell peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, and corn. They spread out their still young leaves and basked in the sunlight. Chapter 32.2 That's right. Take this with you. It's the asparagus I harvested this morning. I think these are the last ones this year. Oh, thank you. Haruki's eyes shone at the sight of the thick asparagus stalks that were put into his hands. They were thicker than his thumbs. Asparagus were subterranean stems that came out of the ground. As they had long lives, you could harvest asparagus for several years. If you didn't harvest them in the summer, they would spread out their limbs and store nutrients. Like this, the roots and stems would grow thicker each year. The asparagus that was sold in supermarkets were usually 2 or 3 years old, but it took at least 5 years to grow the really thick ones. How old are these? I planted them last year. What? Surprising, isn't it? The truth is, I used the monster meat that you brought for compost, and it turned out to have pretty good results. Monster meat wasn't exactly the secret to a long and healthy life, but it was said that it could ease tiredness. However, there was no evidence about what substances had what effect. Still, the rumors spread, and now it was as common as the knowledge that eating snapping turtles was good for your stamina. That being said, most people would have thought that using such delicious meat for that purpose was a little wasteful. Haruki was impressed. "Do you have any more of that compost?" I do. You want some?" "Yes, if you wouldn't mind sharing it." "Not at all. Wait here for a minute." Mr. Kitora returned to his house, and then came back with a bulging sack. As he got closer, Haruki could smell the scent of the compost wafting in the air. "The smell will go away if you let me ferment it a little while longer." "What will you do?" "No, it's fine like this." "Thank you." "Bah, it's nothing. I'll make some better compost later, and when I do, you can help yourself to some of it." "Thank you." Haruki thanked him and was about to leave. That's right. You should take this too." "What is it?" Mr. Kitora gave him a small stone that was rather pretty. It was white and translucent. It looked like a crystal, but didn't have the same joints or milkiness. Overall, it had pale color. It was likely what they called a magic stone. They were occasionally found in the bodies of monsters. That being said, their use was still unknown. Nothing would happen if you destroyed them. There was no outpouring of magic or explosion. You couldn't make a magic sword by putting them into a weapon. It came out of the meat that you brought. I don't know what it's used for, but surely you could use it, since you're an adventurer. "Yes, thank you very much." He didn't have a clue. However, Haruki accepted the magic stone gratefully and left Mr. Kitora's house. He looked at the fields as he returned home. That's when he saw that Karen was standing in front of his house. "What is it, Karen? Did you forget something?" "It will happen today. We will eat wolf meat together." "You are?" Haruki was taken aback by Karen's threatening attitude. To be sure, she had been inviting Haruki to do this for 2 days in a row, but Haruki had continued to reject her. For a while, Haruki had been thinking about doing something for Karen to show his appreciation. But he also had to think about Ria. And now, he had received some asparagus from Mr. Kitora. Well, in that case, he would use his skills to prepare a grand feast today. "Got it. Let's go inside then." "Thank you." He cut the silver wolf meat into 2 centimeters blocks and then crushed them with the backside of his knife. After seasoning the meat with salt and pepper, he took out some frozen bread and started carving it. Then he cracked an egg, sprinkled flour on the meat and dipped them in the egg. Then he covered them in the breadcrumbs. A pot of oil was then heated. Canola was often grown in K-Town. You could get oil from it, and it could also be used for fertilizer, and it was quite easy to grow. A very useful plant. Once the canola oil was hot enough, he gently put the wolf meat into it. The sounds of it sizzling in the oil were music to his ears as the meat began to cook. In the meantime, Haruki cut the asparagus and put them into a pot. The source of this content November L/N. He lightly sprinkled some salt and pepper onto them and then he was finished. When he brought the food to the table, Karen's eyes widened with delight. Are these fried wolf cutlets? Yeah. Sorry that we don't have any sauce. You can have this plum salt instead. Plum salt? Karen looked surprised as Haruki offered her a small pot. I put umeboshi in this during the spring, and when I tried out the plum vinegar that came out, I got this salt. You really can do anything, Karaboshi. Well, it's because of the internet. What used to be grandmother's wisdom could now be easily searched for online. After the stampede started happening, many major servers were shut down, which resulted in massive amounts of knowledge disappearing from the internet. But there was still plenty of information there that related to everyday life. What is this? It's asparagus soup. What? Haruki hadn't thought this would be particularly unusual, but Karen raised her voice in surprise. You can turn asparagus into soup. I thought it is usually grilled or fried. Ah, is that right? Well, this is normal in the place that asparagus is originally from. Well, just try it, he said. And so Karen hesitantly took a sip. Chapter 32.3 After one mouthful, her eyes widened and tears began to fall. It's delicious. It was. The sweetness of the freshly picked asparagus was concentrated in the soup. It was also delicious if you grilled it, but the soup allowed the sweetness to melt. And that was also great. He had really wanted to make miso soup, but miso was too valuable. He barely had any left. And so he had made a salt soup today, which took advantage of the flavor of his ingredients. Thankfully, Karen really enjoyed it. He had been disappointed that they had no sauce for the fried meat. But the wildness of the silver wolf actually went very well with the acidity in the plum salt. This was quite good as well. After that, they continued to eat silently. It must have been especially delicious for Karen, because she was crying. Haruki was also a little teary-eyed. Once the meal was finished and Karen had gone home, Haruki headed to Ria's room. "I'm back. I brought something really good with me today." Even though her husband had returned, Ria ignored him icily. Perhaps she was angry that he hadn't visited her immediately. "This is compost made from monsters. Can I put some inside?" "HMPH. Why don't you, then?" she responded. Compost didn't go well with every plant. If you weren't careful, the plant might get sick or even die. You couldn't just dump anything inside. "Come on, hurry up." Ria tapped the soil. Judging by her attitude, it seemed like the monster compost was at least not something that would have a negative effect on her. As he slowly added it to the soil, Ria's leaves began to relax as if she were soaking in a hot bath. Apparently, it was something that felt really good for her. Suddenly, Ria's face turned towards Haruki as if she had just realized something. Ria was staring at Haruki's chest. What was there? He thought about it. "Oh, do you want Thyza?" He took out the magic stone that Mr. Kitora had given him. It had been in his breast pocket, and then Ria moved quickly and snatched the stone from Haruki's hand. Then she buried it in the ground. "I see." Ria had wanted the rare item. He joked to himself. He had named her after the goddess, but instead of ensuring a good harvest, she just took rare items from him. If this continued, the ground below her would become like a treasure chest. Well, even if they were rare items, they wouldn't really be seen as useful to humans. "Ria, aren't you going to say thank you?" HMPH. New novel chapters are published on "It's Your Fault for Bringing Me Here." Ria's leaves suddenly looked sharp. Of course, he couldn't make any excuses for his behavior, but that was a different matter. "Ria, how about a thank you?" He continued to stare at her. Ria finally gave in and shook her leaves up and down. "That's better." He patted her leaves. And then she started to slap his hands as if she found him annoying. Hard Cow Force, traverse the dungeon at full power. 156th floor Pavia. 290 name, go. Go Anonymous Frontliner. Has Masatsugu arrived at the location yet? 291 name, go. Go Anonymous Frontliner. I don't know. There's no news about it. He went in one of the swan-shaped paddle boats, so it might take some time. However, it seems like things are heating up at the team house. Maybe he'll return soon. 292 name, go. Go Anonymous Frontliner. Have all the volunteers for the recapture mission gathered together? I would join too, if it meant I could fight alongside Masatsugu. 293 name, go. Go Anonymous Frontliner. I don't know. After all, everyone over there are hardcore. They may not let you go with them, in order to prevent information from getting leaked. 294 name, go. Go Anonymous Frontliner. Seriously? Is this really the time to be moving as a single team? just because you want to protect some information. 295 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Maybe they have information that is really important, like stuff about magic tools and enlightenment abilities. 296 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Regardless, people will see it if they are fighting in Shinjuku. 297 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Maybe they'll skip the weak monsters and head straight for the boss. 298 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. That is definitely possible. 299 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Well, there will be other teams fighting to take back Shinjuku, so it's no problem if they skip the weak monsters. 300 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. By the way, I heard that someone got lost in the dungeon. Won't someone go and rescue that person? 301 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. In Shinjuku. Then just leave it to Masatsugu. But I doubt there are even bones left. If they are lucky, then they just might be alive when they meet him. 302 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. No, apparently it's in Chikaho. 303 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. So? 304 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Hey, that's cold. Does no one want to go and rescue this person? You all talk about saving Japan and saving people, but adventurers are all talk. I see. 305 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. Are you stupid? All adventurers go dungeon crawling, fully aware of the dangers. If you go inside, then you are responsible for yourself. You have no right to complain to us. You think other people should risk their lives just because you want to rescue someone? Life's not so easy. We're supposed to be working to help people, so asking for help is completely backward. Just shut up and die if going to inconvenience others. That's what it means to be an adventurer. 306 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. 305 What a samurai. But going too far. If you want to help them, just go yourself. And if you can't do that, put out a quest. 307 Name, Go Anonymous Frontliner. 305 Sorry. 306 I see. Fine. Chapter 33.1 Another sponsored Jumbo chapter. Let's accept the quest. As they continued to hunt until the end of the week, Haruki observed a number of changes. Novelle by N. The first thing was that he was now able to steadily hunt 300 silver wolves a day. Even if he wasn't treating it like a time attack, he could get to 300. If he tried really hard, he could reach 350. That's how much Haruki's base level had risen. However, even if he forced himself to hunt more, it just meant there were more monsters that he couldn't carve up. It seemed like it would be more efficient to kill one strong monster than 3 silver wolves, even if it meant a little less experience. Maybe it was time for him to descend. The other thing was that Haruki and Karen's skills were finally starting to rise naturally. Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill Point, 3, Class, Swordsman. Vitality, Stamina 1-2. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 1-2. Agility, Quickness 1. Dexterity 1-2. Technique, Weapon Mastery, One-Handed Sword 1-2. Throwing 1. Light Armor 0-2. Conceal 1. Imitate 1. Intuition, Detection 0. Special, Growth Acceleration 3. Tame 0. Kurosaki Karen 18 Gender, Female. Skill Points, 3. Class, Spirit User. Vitality, Stamina 0-2. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 0. Magic Power 1. Magic Compatibility 1. Magic Manipulation 1-2. Agility, Quickness 0. Dexterity 0. Technique, Weapon Mastery, Blunt Weapon 0. Light Armor 0. Intuition, Detection 0. Special, Luck 1. Haruki's Stamina, Strength, Dexterity, One-Handed Sword, and Light Armor had all gained 1 point. Karen's Stamina and Magic Manipulation went up by 1 point. As Haruki was the advance guard, they had both gained in the appropriate categories. Though, he still felt the Light Armor had been a little slow. As for Karen's skills, ignoring the Stamina, the reason that Magic Manipulation had gone up instead of Magic Power was because she continued to avoid friendly fire while dealing with the high speed of the wolves. While Karen was doing the main attacks, more of Haruki's skills had gone up. Karen should have been gaining more experience, considering the amount of damage she was dealing to the monsters, and so this was very strange. Perhaps the growth acceleration also affected the growth of the skills. Another thing that changed was that Ria had completely recovered her health. All of her leaves, from the bottom to the top, were now very lively. Even the flower on her head seemed to be more vibrant in color now. Was it because of the monster meat compost? Or was it the magic stone? As for the magic stones, would the effect continue to grow stronger if he continued to bury them inside of the soil? Considering the boss was able to shoot 100 potatoes, it seemed very possible. That being said, this method of attack meant the unleashing of treasures. It was quite tragic that the more they attacked, the weaker they got. One thing that didn't change at all was Akane. She didn't seem well at all. He visited the store after every hunt, but even today, she was not herself. She would look at him with a serious expression and then sigh. "Here are the materials I want you to buy." "Very well." "Put them on the counter." "Got it." That was all they seemed to say to each other now. It was very boring. "That's 187,500 yen. "Oh, that's right. The carving knife that you ordered has arrived." "That's really fast." "Yes, it was a special order, after all." "The whetstones also arrived." "Should I do it for you?" "Please." The carving knife was made from the fang of a silver wolf. While it was just for carving, it had the Yakibashi entry model logo on it. The price was 100,000 yen. As for the sharpness, it was about the same as the silver wolf knife he was currently using. Of course, they had different purposes, and this was not for fighting. Akane was now sharpening his knife with the whetstone. Haruki couldn't quite tell if she was even looking at her hands as she worked. Was she not concentrating? Or maybe she couldn't. But she was still doing the job. When he put his finger on the blade, he easily sliced off a thin layer of skin. It felt brand new. "How much do I owe you?" "Hey!" As Akane was so slow to react, Haruki lost his patience and shouted. "What the hell is going on? You've been acting strangely, you know? What happened to all that energy you once had?" "I'm not like that all the time." "I understand that, but you've been like this for long enough. It's driving me crazy." "That's not my problem." "Still, maybe right. But if it bothers you so much, maybe you can listen to me." The way Akane talked made it sound like she didn't have any hope. What could possibly be bothering her so much? The first thing he thought of was the store. Perhaps Haruki was selling her too many materials and the store couldn't handle it. That would be no good for him as well. If this store had to close, then he would have to travel all the way to Sapporo in order to sell materials and buy weapons and armor. Chapter 33.2. If this place was in danger, Haruki would do everything he could to help her. The thing is, the branch manager of the Sapporo store has gone missing. At first, it was thought that she ran away because the store was doing badly, but upon inspecting her card history, it was discovered that she had gone into Chikaho. A record was automatically kept every time an adventurer went through the ticket barrier with their card. Through this, they were able to see who had yet to come out of the dungeon. That being said, there was nothing that could actually be done. They didn't know where in the dungeon the person was located. "How long has she been in there?" "About 5 days." Akane had changed around that time as well. So there it was. She must have been very worried about this manager. "Aren't you going to go and help her?" Akane probably had an adventurer's license, and her level was quite high. Haruki felt that Akane would have an easier time than him when it came to exploring the dungeon. However, Akane shook her head. "I have to tend to this store. I run this place. I'm the manager here, you know. I can't just close the store for several days because my co-worker went missing." She wanted to go and help her, but her position did not allow it. "Well, you can just go on your day off." "Have you ever seen me take a day off?" Now that I think about it. Was this place opened all year round? Whoa. This was one of those super black companies. Ah, are you serious? Joking, right? Yes. But in a place like this, what is the difference between work and rest? I see. The truth was that Akane only ever had anything to do when Haruki visited, so even if she came to work every day, she only did about an hour of actual work. "So if I put up a quest, will you accept it?" "It depends on the contents." "Of course." "I want you to find the branch manager." "The location is Chikaho, somewhere near the 8th floor." "Why do you think it's the 8th floor?" "There was a request from the weapons and armor factory for some Silver Wolf materials." It seems like she entered the dungeon in order to meet the deadline, and Silver Wolves appear in the 6th and 8th floors of Chihako. So she should be somewhere near that area. I see. And what is the time limit? I can't just search for her until I find her. There may not even be bones left. Akane frowned at Haruki's suggestion. However, It was better to consider the worst-case scenario. It would help her be prepared for it if it did happen. After all, if this person hadn't returned for 5 days, it was very likely that she was already dead. Turning your eyes away from reality and putting up a quest was good and all, but you couldn't complain when the results were not what you expected. It was like those customers who went to designers thinking that a rock can turn into a diamond if they were put in the hands of a professional. Professionals weren't wizards. No matter how much you tried, a rock would just be a pretty rock at best. Likewise, when accepting a quest, you had to let the client know that a terrible conclusion was also possible, or it could cause trouble later on. You said you would find her. Why can't you do it? I'll sue you, they would say angrily. The source of this content November L/N. I said I would search, but I didn't say I would find them. Such explanations would only make matters worse. Such were the possibilities. As an adventurer, Haruki was still a newcomer, but his previous job had given him a good understanding of contracts and requests. Haruki didn't think of Akane as a bad customer, but the more important the missing person was to the client, the harder it became to control your emotions. And so Haruki felt it was necessary to talk about such a cruel future. Perhaps Akane understood his intentions because her chest moved as if she was swallowing something. I understand. How about 1 month? That's very long. Why? She is carrying a magic bag. I think she would have been prepared to survive even if she got lost. I see. Haruki thought about it before opening his mouth again. Sorry, I don't want to leave this place for a whole month, so I can't accept it. Why? We were clearly heading towards an agreement just now. Akane was very angry. Perhaps the anger had overtaken her other emotions because she was returning to her old spirited self. Look, there is a reason why I don't want to leave. If he left the house for a whole month, Ria would surely die. Unfortunately, Haruki cared much more about Ria than the life of someone he didn't even know. Adventurers are so selfish. They all talk about saving others and saving Japan, but they won't lift a finger to help a lost adventurer. You're all just talk, aren't you? It would be one thing if the person was right in front of me, but this person is in Chikaho. Why am I being blamed for not traveling all of the ways that to save someone? If you want to save her, ask the adventurers in Sapporo. Chapter 33.3 Karaboshi. Karaboshi. Karen was tapping him on the shoulder. Going too hard on the poor girl. Adventurers were always facing death. You were always risking your life when going into the dungeons, but that didn't mean they would risk their lives all of the time without question. There is someone I want to save, so give me your life, and if you don't, you are nothing but a cruel-hearted person. That was what Akane was saying, and Haruki was not amused, and so he rejected the request. Haruki had decided that the only time he would put his life on the line to save others was when they were civilians and within his reach. Perhaps it would be more humane to increase that range. However, there were too many lives he couldn't save at this point. He needed to hold back, or the weight of reality would crush him. It was true that he was also being too harsh. He was being childish. Haruki bit his lower lip as he realized this. Are you sure that you can't help her? Being away from Ria for a whole month. Perhaps it was written on his face. While Karen seemed less than pleased, she whispered to Haruki, just take it if you don't want to leave it here. It's not like you can't move the thing, right? Ah, that's true. She was in a planter, so he could carry her wherever he wanted. Karen's suggestion did make a lot of sense. And just like that, the biggest issue that had been holding Haruki back was solved. In that case, he could search the 8th floor of Chikaho for a month. He would be able to level up and be rewarded for it. It was perfect. There was no way that he would reject it now. Alright, I'll accept your request, Akane. Really? However, aside from the reward money, you have to cover for a month's expenses. Obviously, the reward is 300,000 yen. Even if you find her in 1 day or don't find her in 30 days, you are guaranteed that much at least. But you will get an additional 200,000 yen if you do find her, so you could potentially make 500,000 in just 1 day. Lucrative? No, I guess. It was average, maybe a little above average for a rescue mission on the upper floors. However, he would also be losing money while he was away. Perhaps Akane read his mind because she raised 5 fingers in the air. I'll buy any materials you bring back with a 5% markup. Also, appraising of materials and maintenance fees will be free, and I will, of course, cover living, medial and food expenses. What do you think? Sounds amazing, right? So will you do it? Akane looked more serious than ever. And so Haruki nodded with an equally serious expression. This person usually ranted about being the most beautiful and angelic woman. But for once, she was doing everything in her power to help someone else. He wanted to do what he could in answer to her prayer. Haruki was moved by Akane's desperation, and he decided that he'd work hard to find this branch manager. After Haruki and Karen left, Akane closed the cash register and sighed. However, it was different from the sighs that had escaped her during the last few days. This one was incredibly warm. "I'm so glad that someone is going to look for that idiot." Really, she was so stupid, Akane muttered to herself. But in spite of the prickliness of her words, her expression was soft. The Sapporo store manager Oiso Seika, she had gone into the dungeon herself, as she was unable to get enough Silver Wolf materials from the adventurers. As Iakaibashi did business with rough adventurers, their employees had to undergo some training. However, this training was more for their own protection. It was not so they could go out and gather materials themselves. So she had gone out and done something that was not part of her job and then got lost on top of that. She was so dumb, Akane thought. If you sowed your seeds right, you could easily gather Silver Wolf materials from adventurers. The fact that Oiso had been incapable of doing this proved that she wasn't much of an employee. Not only that, but Akane had also been buying a lot of Silver Wolf materials in K-Town, and had plenty of stock left. However, no matter how many times she said she would transport the products, Oiso would not listen. Had she sent them, there would have been no need to go and hunt Silver Wolves. Perhaps her pride had gotten in the way. Updated from Novelbin. So stupid, so very stupid, stupid, hey. But it was because of such fools like her, that employees that were overflowing with talent were able to shine. In other words, Oiso was the darkness, a being who allowed Akane to shine even brighter. Her disappearance was a great loss to the world. Akane's world. I won't let you die, so you better stay alive. Good at being stubborn. After all, is going to go and help you now. So useless. He. How would she mock her once she returned? It was with such thoughts that Akane worked. She was now completely back to her old self. Like this, she desperately played the fool in order to forget that horrible possibility. Probably. Chapter 34.1. A bonus chapters to thank those who have been supporting this novel. Let's prepare for the search. He made plans with Karen on the following day, and then they began their trip to Sapporo by car. Haruki was in the driver's seat. Karen was in the passenger's seat. Andrea was sitting in the back. It would be a fatal blow if she was knocked over and the contents spilled out. Due to such concerns, Ria's planter was tied down very securely in the back seat. So, it's the 6th, 7th and 8th floors of Chikaho. They shouldn't be too much trouble to explore if we're dealing with monsters that are on the same level as the Silver Wolves. True. But things will be a little different on the 6th floor. Huh? I thought the inside of the dungeon changes on the 10th floor. Isn't it always the center layer? Yes. But what I mean is there will be traps. What Haruki was worried about the most regarding this mission, was that there would be traps once they passed the 5th floor. At least on the upper layers, there definitely weren't any traps that would kill you instantly. However, traps such as pitfalls and bear traps would start appearing. If you got caught in one of them during a fight, you would almost surely die. And so even if the 5th and 6th floors had the same monsters, the difficulty would change greatly. It's just like a tutorial. Maybe it is. Even now, no one knew why the dungeons had appeared or how they were run. However, it was easy to imagine that it required tremendous energy to maintain them. And so, where was all that energy coming from? Maybe it ate living creatures and turned them into energy. Maybe it was easier to advance the deeper you went into the dungeons, because there were more places for them to absorb people, and it was more efficient. He had seen such speculation on the message boards. Obviously, speculation was just speculation. However, it was true that it was designed to be convenient for humans. A dungeon that bred monsters was convenient for humans. There had to be some reason for it. I really do want to go ahead and explore, but we have to get used to the 6th floor first. And how long will that take? It would be nearly a month for a normal adventurer, I think. Will we make it in time? We'll have to, Haruki replied vaguely. However, he already had an idea about how to deal with the traps. According to the wiki information, you would be able to see traps that were set in the dungeon if you sharpened your senses. Because of this, Haruki thought that he would be able to avoid them if he raised the trap detection skill. Skill point, 4-3. Intuition detection 0-1. As a test, Haruki had put 1 point into his detection skill last night. When he did, the dim dungeon seemed to become just a little bit brighter, as if a light had been turned on. New novel chapters are published on. And it wasn't just his eyes that felt the difference. His entire body was detecting things in that space. The bumps under his feet and in the walls. He was able to see them even when he closed his eyes, as long as he concentrated. He wouldn't know until he actually got there, but Haruki felt that now that he had raised detection by 1 point, he would be able to sense the traps. That was what Haruki was betting on. He parked the car in front of a hotel they had reserved, and they checked in at the counter. As of now, Haruki was the only adventurer who had succeeded in taming a monster. And so just as a precaution, Haruki stuffed Ria into his magic bag. He could only put things in the bag if they were under 20 centimeters in diameter. The planter was barely under that, and so by bending Ria's body a little, he was able to put her inside. Currently, Karen was carrying this bag that Ria was stuffed in. As a way of causing mischief, Ria would poke her leaves out of the pouch. "Don't do that," Karen would whisper frantically and hold the pouch closed. After checking into the hotel, Haruki headed to the general goods store for adventurers. The store was filled with tools that were believed to have various special effects. It looked like a village vanguard. It was littered with so much stuff, but that's what made it exciting. In fact, the reason that the place resembled a village vanguard was because it was under the same umbrella. Everything here was quite niche. Many of the things seen on the shelves had uses that were completely unknown. The tools and medicine reminded you of the occult. Monsters might stay away if you carry this. Maybe this will be good for stamina. This might tell you if a monster is approaching. Such signs were plastered everywhere. None of them knew for sure. It was all speculation until the dungeons were created. Japan and the rest of the world mainly believed in science. Drinkable detergent, pot of good fortune, romance bracelet, gold nugget that heals cancer. These things that strayed from science were associated with the occult. However, once the dungeons appeared, people's faith in science diminished greatly. The reason was that nearly everything in the dungeon was immune to what science could throw at it. So it was not strange for things that came out of the dungeon to have such effects. Of course, nobody knew. Regardless, people believed in the dungeons now. Nothing could be proven by science. However, somehow, the expected effect would appear. That's why they were associated with the occult. In any case, it was possible that science would one day be able to explain why these items had such effects. But that future still seemed far away. While most of the signs tried to appear light-hearted and had exaggerated on them, you could safely expect nearly all of them to work. And so Haruki looked at the different items and started to throw drinkable recovery medicine into his shopping cart. Altogether, it was 1,000,000 yen. Normally, he wouldn't have bought them. However, if he happened to find the manager Oi Isosaka, and she was badly wounded and couldn't move, then they would be incredibly useful. The sign for the potions read, "Fractures and heavy injuries will heal in just 1 day," so it was promising. He continued to look through the store carefully in case there was something else that would be useful. And then Haruki discovered something much like a Neil in the monster repellent area. Chapter 34.2 Slimy Eel. I was able to return home, completely unhurt, even after I was surrounded by monsters on the upper layer. And it was all because I was carrying this adventurer testimonial product. Monster Raw, produced, Gashiroshi's Dungeon, middle floors. Expiration date, 1 day after the product is opened. Everything about this seemed creepy. It would repel humans just as much as monsters. Haruki put his hand on his chin and glared at the sign. As it said upper layers, it was likely not very effective on stronger monsters, or maybe it only worked on monsters that were the same strength as you. So this thing wouldn't make a dramatic difference. With all of this considered, Haruki compared a number of products. The other shelves had things like "it might erase smell and sounds," "do not abuse or may erase your presence," "peeping is illegal," etc. There were a lot of items that helped you escape the notice of monsters. But such effects would be lethal to Haruki. He could under no circumstances touch them. And so Haruki ended up buying the slimy eel. It would last for 1 day. And so he threw 4 of them into his basket. I think that's enough for today. He would try going to the 6th floor and below, and if he still needed something, he could buy it later. Haruki went to look for Karen before going to the checkout. Perhaps she also had things that she wanted to buy. And so Haruki activated his newly acquired detection skill. He was able to find Karen immediately. New novel chapters are published on. What are you doing? Karen's shoulders jumped. At the same time, there was a cheap sound coming from the thing she was holding. Pilko. Look here, the monsters will notice if you use it in the dungeon, so don't do it, alright? I'm warning you. Product, monster stuffed, produced, Nakafuda Dungeon, middle layer, expiration date, indefinite. This was all written on a sign with neat handwriting. The description reminded Haruki of a certain comedian. Haruki enjoyed the surrealness of it all. The thought that a lot of people would see this and ignore it made him chuckle. Karen was currently holding the Pilko corpse. But unlike the slimy eel, this one had been properly stuffed. The other thing was raw. As for the price, it was 200,000 yen for just one, and it had the creepy effect of luring monsters towards you. Who the hell would want that? It's not like I'm attracted to such things. I just thought that it might come in handy. The thing in her hand was still cheeping. It seemed like she enjoyed the feeling of squishing it. I really don't think that expenses are going to cover that. Yes. When they left, Karen cast regretful glances towards the shelf where Pilko cheeped. It was as if it were yanking her hair and she could not stop looking. As it was still midday, Haruki decided to increase the number of floors they could go to through the gate for tomorrow. They would go to the 4th floor through the gate and aim for the 5th floor. As Haruki and Karen had already killed so many silver wolves and grown, the kill rabbits were now ridiculously weak. They were so hard at first. Haruki recalled the early struggle as he broke the necks of the kill rabbits with a single kick. As for the boss, it was just a kill rabbit that was twice as large. Haruki went in alone and dodged its attacks for a while. It wasn't as agile as a silver wolf. When Haruki quickly cut off its head with the magic sword, Karen's face seemed to fall a little. Had she wanted to experience a boss fight? Now that I think about it, you haven't fought a boss yet. That's right. Will you let me fight the next one? Sure. Of course. If the boss is too strong, then I'll have to join you. Yes, thank you. They went down to the 5th floor and immediately activated the gate. After that, they ignored leveling and material gathering and just moved onward. The 5th floor only had kill rabbits as well. However, unlike the 4th floor, the kill rabbits always appeared in groups of 3 and 4. Unlike the garage dungeon, the difficulty rose gently with every floor. However, even when the kill rabbits attacked in groups, they weren't much of an obstacle for Haruki. The boss was the same size as the one on the 4th floor, but the color was darker. It also seemed to be a little more muscular. Perhaps the difficulty had risen a little. Karen, it's all yours. I'll go in to help you if it gets dangerous. Thank you. She sounded a little tense as she moved forward. I could tell by her shoulders that she was anxious. Karen stopped at a distance before the boss reacted, and then she raised her staff and started to concentrate. She seems fine. The power of Karen's magic was different depending on how much power she put into it. If she spent a lot of time on a single attack like she was doing now, then she could do more damage at once than even Haruki. Haruki was sure of her victory, and so he quietly took out his skill board. He swiped the screen and displayed Karen's status. Oh, that's too far. What? Haruki tilted his head in confusion. Ria 0 gender, female. Skill point, 8. Rating, Leaf Demon. Plus vitality, plus strength, plus dexterity, plus skill, plus intuition, plus special. Ray, are you there? Or should it be expected, since she was tamed? But it hadn't even been a year since she was born. And a girl? Really? Haruki was even more confused after seeing what was displayed on the skill board. He wanted to verify it. He felt greedy for more knowledge after seeing information that he didn't know. His whole body was urging him on to find out more. And quickly. However, now was not the time for that. Karen would launch the magic as soon as she was ready. He had to continue to prepare, and so he begrudgingly moved to Karen's skill board. Then he touched intuition and opened the tree. As Haruki had learned the detection skill, they could avoid traps if he led the way. However, what if she couldn't follow his lead? What if they were in a situation where they had to run away from monsters? Karen would easily step into a trap. Considering the possibilities of such emergencies, it would be best if Karen was also able to see traps. That being said, just distributing 1 point made a big difference to your senses. If she suddenly became sharper in spite of doing nothing, then she would surely think that it was strange. Kill the boss and level up. If she could be persuaded to believe that it was the reason for the sudden change, then everything would be fine. So thinking, Haruki decided to use a point at the same time that Karen attacked. He saw that she was about to unleash the magic, and then, just as the magic hit the boss, Haruki tapped the skill up button. Skill point, 3-2. Intuition detection 01. It seemed that she noticed the change. Karen's eyes had widened. As for the boss that was hit by her magic, it was dead after its head exploded. Outside of manipulation, all her skills were level 1, and yet it was so powerful. Good job. How was it? I feel kind of weird. Maybe you leveled up and your senses are sharper now? Oh, yes, maybe that's it. It wasn't the most convincing argument, but Karen seemed to accept it. So, that problem was solved. That being said, there was a limit to how many times he could raise skills that had such an effect on your senses. But they could also end up in a dangerous situation, and any hesitation and worrying could result in not being able to save lives that he should be able to save. Haruki would have to think of a solution before it was too late. Chapter 35.1 Jumbo Chapter sponsored by TM&DC. Let's strengthen Ria. Unlike the floors before it, there were lots of weeds growing on the sides of the passages in the 6th floor. It was really just a small change, but as there hadn't even been shepherd's purse up until now, it seemed like a huge difference. Currently, Haruki had yet to see a trap. Perhaps there weren't any set up here yet. Still, Haruki walked cautiously and activated the gate. Should we go and check it out? Yes. We can just run away if something bad happens, and then we can figure out what to do at the hotel. That's true. Alright, let's go a little further then. For Haruki and Karen, the 6th floor was as far as they had ever gone in a dungeon. But the monsters here were silver wolves. Hunting them down was no problem. However, as they had never gone to the 6th floor before, they were quite nervous. His heart began to race. His body felt both numb and hot. Was he alright? Would his power really be enough here? However, when he finally did face the silver wolves, a lot of the tenseness in Haruki's body dissipated. Yes, they are the same level as in the garage dungeon. He had been anxious about the possibility of them being stronger, and so Haruki sighed in relief. As there had been no noticeable difference. Are we going to continue on to the 7th floor now? Karen asked. Haruki put a hand on his chin and thought about it silently. The monsters would be the same silver wolves they fought in the garage dungeon, so they likely wouldn't have much trouble on the way. The problem is the boss. Well, go that far, and if it looks dangerous, we can turn back. Got it. Haruki had looked up information about the 6th and 7th floors on the wiki, so he knew the map layout and how to fight the bosses. However, looking at information was very different from actually walking and fighting. As proof of this, Haruki had been overwhelmed by the quickness and intelligence of the centipedes during his first battle with them. As their attacks were not lethal, the situation was not too dangerous. But things would be different if it was the bosses on the 6th and 7th floors. A mummy hunter can't turn into a mummy. He needed to be extra careful. He mapped the floor and was wary of hidden traps as he advanced. Then he saw the dim outline of a trap within the dark corridor. If Haruki did not have 1 point in detection, he would have very likely not realized and would have stepped on it. Karen, can you see this trap? Yes, though, not clearly. That's good. Haruki was glad that Karen was able to see it too. But as a test, Haruki stepped on the trap deliberately. Kakaraboshi, are you okay? Yeah, I'm totally fine. He stepped on a square meter of ground that was a slightly different color. Then the part that had looked like ground suddenly disappeared, revealing a hole. The hole was about a meter deep. Karaboshi, did you do that on purpose? Yeah. Why did you fall down on purpose? You have to experiment first, or you won't know how the hole opens up, will you? But what if there were spikes down there? You would have been badly injured, you know? Oh, Karen glared fixedly at him. She was perfectly right. The traps on the upper floors were not lethal. And while Haruki was aware of this, his actions were still much too careless. But he had his excuses as well. By falling into a trap, he would be able to react quickly if it happened later on by accident. Besides, he might gain information that wasn't on the wiki. In fact, the actual pit was a little wider than the area you had to step on in order to trigger the trap. That meant that if you stuck too closely together, not only the person who stepped on it, but others might fall into it as well. There are some things I can only know if I fall in, Haruki declared proudly. Of course, He was still inside of a hole, so he looked pathetic either way. Karen looked at him and sighed, possibly with a little exaggeration. "I don't see why you had to fall in on purpose." "That's it, huh?" As Karen looked at him in confusion, Haruki's eyes lit up brightly. When the silver wolf appeared, Haruki immediately turned his back to it. "Let's run." "Huh? What?" Karen's eyes widened. She didn't understand what Haruki wanted. And yet Haruki was approaching her with the monster right behind him. "Come on, run!" Exclamation mark. Karen's face grew hot as Haruki grabbed her hand and led her. What the hell was happening? He had never made such a bold move before. The hand of a man. It was completely different from her own. It was big and rough. This first contact with him was causing Karen to panic completely. They were being chased by monsters, and yet monsters were the furthest thing from her mind. The escape ended quickly. Novel by N. After they retreated for about 10 meters, Haruki suddenly let go of Karen's hand and turned around. Her hand felt cold. Surely he could have held it for just a little longer? Karen's eyes turned toward Haruki in protest, but he didn't even notice. As for what he was doing, yes, he was kicking the 3 silver wolves as if they were soccer balls. The silver wolves flew through the air in a beautiful arc, and then landed. The 3 silver wolves disappeared into the ground. Was there a pitfall? Yes. They had landed in a spot where there was a pitfall. A sad and high-pitched whine could be heard from inside of the hole. "Did you fall in once because you wanted to do that?" "Yeah. Perhaps it was because they were born from the same dungeon, but monsters never stepped on traps. It was as if they knew where they were, as they would avoid them even if you led them in the right direction." That being said, it wasn't as if they couldn't be caught in them at all. The fact that they avoided the traps was proof of this. Chapter 35.2. Of course, it would be a waste of effort to force them into traps that they would usually avoid. If you had the power to push them onto the trap, it would be easier to just kill them. "You sure do think of strange things." Karen, the one that said "I don't see why you have to fall in on purpose when you can just make the monsters trigger the traps." Karen looked very confused. But this time, Haruki was very confident in his position. It was like this during that time with the potatoes as well. Karen always gave him the most interesting suggestions. Haruki rated her unexpected ideas very highly. "But, that's not what I meant." "Well, did you learn something from doing that?" "I learned that monsters can get caught in traps." "Is that information going to be useful?" "If you wanted to drop a monster into a pitfall, they had to be a monster you can kick into the air. Furthermore, they would have to land in the range of the trap, which was just 1 meter in diameter. How many times would all of those requirements conveniently overlap for you?" One day, Haruki's shoulders slumped at Karen's question, and he answered without confidence. It was when they had encountered silver wolves 10 times and killed 35 of them, that Haruki discovered an especially large room. This was likely a boss room. Up until now, they didn't do anything as stupid as stepping on a trap during combat. However, they might not be able to keep track of the trap locations if they were fighting a boss. He looked from afar and checked the position of each trap. The room was about 20 meters long and 20 meters wide. There were 5 traps. They were all pitfalls that would bury them up to their waist if they fell in. The traps were scattered randomly around the room. This was especially dangerous placement for someone like Haruki, as he constantly dodged and attacked. "These are the times when I really wish we had a shield bearer to stand in the front. Things would be so much easier." The boss on this floor was a big wolf, and the standard way of fighting it was to use a shield bearer to keep it in one place. The difficulty of this fight would change greatly depending on whether or not you had a shield bearer. In fact, he had read about it in a certain adventurer's blog. A team without a shield bearer had forced their way in and ended up falling into the pitfalls when trying to dodge the big wolf's attacks. "What should we do?" She could no longer stand the silence, and so Karen asked Haruki hesitantly. "Yeah, it's quite possible that he'll step on the traps if I dodge its attacks while fighting. That being said, he'll probably get hit if I don't move around. Perhaps if he was extra careful, he could manage to avoid getting hit. It might be possible if he raised his agility by 1 point." Haruki thought hard about it. New novel chapters are published on. A unique idea flashed in his mind. Yes, he would go with that. Haruki quickly put down his bag and took a pot out of it. He took in a deep breath and paused. Haruki closed his eyes tightly and strengthened his resolve. Karen, can you promise that you won't tell anyone about what I'm about to do now? Yes. She must have been pressured by the sense of urgency. Karen nodded with a croak. Haruki had been thinking about it for a while, when he would tell her about the skill board. If he continued to hide it from her, it would make it harder to decide during crucial moments when it would help them to raise a skill level. In that case, it would be best for him to just tell Karen about the board. Haruki made up his mind and took the skill board out. Karen, take Ria out of the magic bag. Ria. Yeah. As he said this, Haruki displayed Ria's stats on the skill board. Ria 0 gender, female. Skill point, 8. Class, Leaf Demon. Vitality, Stamina 0. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 0. Agility, Quickness 0. Dexterity 0. Technique, Weapon Mastery, Throwing 0. Intuition, Detection 0. Special, Treasure Chest 0. It was all still so bizarre. And what was treasure chest? It was just dirt. Haruki kept these thoughts to himself and started to distribute the 8 skill points. Ria 0 gender, female. Skill point, 80. Class, Leaf Demon. Vitality, Stamina 0. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 0 Agility, Quickness 1. Dexterity 1. Technique, Weapon Mastery, Throwing 3. Intuition, Detection 0. Special, Treasure Chest 1. Ria, can you replenish your ammunition from this pot? What's this all of a sudden? Ria seemed to say as she swayed. However, she extended her nozzle and started to suck in the potato stones from the pot. Perhaps it was because he put a point into treasure chest. She was able to fit more inside than he had expected. Huh? What? He could feel that Ria was surprised. Alright, Ria. When I say the word, will you attack the boss with me? I don't really understand. Still, Ria nodded. Alright. 3, 2, 1, go. As he gave the signal, both Haruki and Ria launched the potato stones at the same time. Haruki replenished her reserve from the jar, while Ria sucked up the stones from the treasure chest. The bullets shot straight forward all at once and slammed into the big wolf. Dents started to appear on its legs, head, and body. Haruki's bullets broke the boss bones, while Ria's stabbed deep into it. It didn't take 10 seconds for the boss to become completely silent. Ria's potato stones were clearly faster than Haruki's. Strength 2 and Throw 3 were no joke. Haruki was sure that if he were to fight Ria, there would be nothing that he could do other than be annihilated. And yet she wasn't even a year old. How was she so strong? Karaboshi. Karen was gripping her staff and looking at him very seriously. Haruki sensed anxiety in her expression that he couldn't put his finger on, and so he braced himself. When she had first seen Ria, her eyes had been filled with animosity. So was she now feeling fear after having seen the power of Ria's bullets? Was she going to demand that he uproot her? Kill her? A cold sweat began to run down Haruki's back. If you were going to use ranged attacks, why wouldn't you ask me to join you? Oh, that. What do you mean, that? I can use magic too. You know, I can use it much better than that Ria thing. Apparently she was still looking at Ria as a rival when it came to using ranged attacks. As for Ria, she was feeling a little sick after defeating a strong monster and leveling up. Her stem drooped to the side. Still, the leaves were twitching, and it was evident that she was angry. Chapter 35.3 So, Karaboshi, how did Ria become strong all of a sudden? It was just a short while ago that you claimed her attacks were not lethal. Yeah, about that. And so Haruki told Karen about the magic tool that he had and what he currently knew. Karen must have gotten an idea of just how powerful this magic tool was. Her eyes had been shining at first, but her expression started to darken. If the rest of the world finds out about this, my magic will look like nothing compared to the horrible things that might happen to you. Yeah, that's why I need to keep it a secret. The only reason in revealing it now is because it's with you, Karen. Karen was a team member. That's how Haruki saw her. He didn't want to lose her or create a situation where that could happen, and so he told her his secret. That way, if they did end up in a dangerous situation, he wouldn't have to worry when raising her skills. Because it's Karen whispered and then laughed. It was clear that she was trying to keep a straight face, but her mouth betrayed her true feelings. The source of this content November L by N. He hadn't meant to say anything that was amusing. Well, there it is. I have the ability to raise the abilities of individuals. Does that mean that I have a skill tree too? You do. Want to see it? Yes. He brought out the board and directed the display towards Karen. Huh. There sure are a lot of skills here. Are there any skills you want to raise? Magic. Put all of my points into magic. But I don't think that's a good idea. We could be in a pinch and just do it, Karen said as she pressed hard into him. Haruki leaned away. So close. It was like they were about to kiss. Well, there was no risk of that happening, as he was wearing a mask. Oh, well, fine. Haruki was defeated, and so he put all of the points into Karen's magic power tree. Kurosaki Karen 18 Gender, female. Skill points, 30. Class, Spirit User. Vitality, Stamina 1. Natural Recovery 0. Strength 0. Magic Power 1 3. Magic Compatibility 1 2. Magic Manipulation 2. Agility Quickness 0. Dexterity 0. Technique Weapon Mastery Blunt Weapon 0. Light Armor 0. Intuition Detection 1. Special Luck 1. Now, both Ria and Karen had very peaky abilities, but it shouldn't be a problem. He would make up for any deficiencies. That's what it meant to be a team. And he'll defeat the boss on the next floor. Don't get ahead of yourself. Your senses change a lot when your skill level goes up. You'll have to fight weak monsters for a while until you get used to these much more powerful attacks. But, no buts. I don't want to get hit by one of your attacks now that they hit so much harder. If he were hit by a Magic Energy 3 attack, it would do a lot more than knock him out. All of her points had gone there, so it was very likely that he'd be blown to bits. Just the thought of such lethal magic coming from behind him was horrifying. As for what the big wolf dropped, Haruki picked up the giant fangs and then they went down to the 7th floor. Compared to the 6th floor, the weeds on the 7th floor seemed to be a lot taller. Maybe they would go up to the waist by the time they reached the 8th floor. If a trap happened to be behind the grass, it would be a lot easier to miss it and accidentally step on it. And so they would have to be extra careful while moving. He activated the gate, and then they searched for monsters so that Karen could test her magic on them. Conveniently, 3 silver wolves started running towards them from the opposite side of the corridor. Karen, use your magic on them. Okay. Karen raised her staff and concentrated. In the meantime, Haruki pulled out his dagger and waited. He leaned forward in preparation for taking down any who got past her. As magic energy gathered into Karen's staff, it reacted in a way that they had never seen before. Karen's magic was transparent and colorless. However, there was something like a white mist that swirled within it. Was this safe? The charge time was the same as always. This had previously been enough to take down a silver wolf in a single hit. But, instant, flicker, detonation, blinding light. Their world flashed white and Haruki had to raise his hand to cover his eyes. The staff recoiled after unleashing the magic. The shockwave caused it to fly back and slam into Karen's forehead. Crumble, crumble. The magic carved away chunks of the floor as it shot towards the silver wolves. All in a second. When Haruki opened his eyes, he gulped at the sight before him. Karen was much the same. She even let out a small scream. The charge time had been the same as always. However, the results were completely different. The 3 silver wolves that had been about to attack them had transformed into scraps of meat. See? That was the only thing that came out of Haruki's mouth. Raising it all at once was dangerous. Alright? Yes. Karen was amazed by what raising the skill had done. But she also realized how dangerous it was now. Her knees gave way and she covered her mouth with her hand. Was that your full power? I think I could go a little farther. You better not. Alright? If Haruki were hit by magic like that from the back, he would definitely be killed. She could under no circumstances use it while he was in the lead. You have to practice so you can adjust the size and strength of your attacks. Yes. Karen's forehead looked a little red as she nodded apologetically. She would also need to raise her strength. Her forehead would not last long in its current state. You should work out once we return to the surface. Since we're on the 7th floor, I have more points, right? Can you put them into strength? Denied. Haruki rejected the request bluntly. It was dangerous to raise skills so casually. Ria and Karen were living proof of this. It would be better to avoid using the points unless it was necessary for getting out of sudden danger. Otherwise, the balance would be broken and that was more likely to cause accidents. Your strength is currently at 0, so you should raise it to 1 by working out. He wasn't sure how long it would take, but your physical strength went up by hunting monsters. As long as she took things seriously, it should go up in no time. Perhaps Karen hated working out because the outer ends of her eyebrows lowered and she snorted. Chapter 36.1 Let's renew our resolve to rescue. The silver wolves on the 7th floor had fur that was slightly darker than the ones above, and they also seemed slightly stronger to Haruki. Once the fighting started. I see, so there is a slight change. Even though they were the same type of monster, there were changes between floors, such as suddenly grouping together or growing stronger. Of course, this information was all in the wiki, important for beginners. Basic dungeon knowledge. If the silver wolves on the 6th floor were level 10, then they were 11 or 12 on the 7th floor. So it was still a very small difference. However, it could feel like a huge difference when 3 of them came at you all at once. Even if you knew about it, you had to really experience it for yourself. Haruki dodged the attacks as he observed the silver wolf's dexterity and strength. The fact that both were raised caused Haruki's eyes to shine. Now, this was getting interesting. He dodged their bites with some quick footwork. He blocked the claws with his dagger, and when they rammed into him, he kicked them from the side. New novel chapters are published on. Over and over, he dodged their attacks, defended, and moved. Haruki laughed. It was like he was playing with his pet dogs. Oh, if only he could play like this for an hour. Karaboshi, can I attack them now? Yes. Haruki had gotten carried away with the dogs, but Karen's shrill voice brought him back. They had not come here to play. He needed to be careful. And so Haruki kicked all 3 of them as hard as he could, and then stepped back. Now, got it. This time, she didn't unleash too much magic. A thin, white vein flew towards the silver wolves. Flash. The magic hit them. However, there was not enough power. It did no damage. Too weak. Next, the silver wolves attacked, and so he kicked them once again and gave the order. But this time, it was a little too strong. Karen unleashed 3 bolts of magic that blew up the heads and bodies of the silver wolves. Well, your aim is improving, but the force was too strong. Ohyu. Karen went pale as she saw the silver wolf guts splatter everywhere. But Haruki had carved up their corpses many times in front of her. How was she still not used to seeing this kind of gore? Taking apart a corpse and taking apart a living creature. Perhaps it was those 2 things that made a huge difference in her mind. Still, they continued to make the silver wolves their practice targets. After the 5th battle, Karen seemed to have gotten the hang of it. She was able to avoid hitting Haruki, even if he was in front of her. Or even if he was hit, she was able to avoid killing him. I'm sorry that it took me so long. Really? I thought you were quite fast. If he was being honest, Haruki expected them to sacrifice about 10 to 15 wolf packs before she was able to control her attacks. In fact, that was how long it took Haruki after he had raised his physical abilities. Though, he had only raised it by 1 point, so he hadn't been as disoriented as Karen had been. The reason she was able to grasp it so quickly was because she had worked hard to raise magic manipulation up to 2 by herself. It was really important to not rely entirely on your skill. Karaboshi, should we really be spending so much time on this? What do you mean? We're always doing the same thing. Haruki realized what Karen was trying to say, and his chin drew back. Indeed, they had come here to rescue Oiso Seika, and yet here they were, level grinding as if it were any other day, or at least, that's what it looked like they were doing. I think I said this before, but there's no point if the rescuers get lost. I understand that you're impatient, but it's necessary that we spend time here in order to save her for sure. We'll be facing more than just silver wolves. They hadn't met anything else on the 7th floor yet, but aside from the silver wolves, there were rare enemies known as owners. At this point, silver wolves were no threat to Haruki and Karen. However, these owners would be a different story. According to the wiki information, it would be a tough battle. Just thinking about it was enough to send a shiver down Haruki's spine. He wanted to fight them as soon as possible. He wanted to find out how strong they were. When would they appear? They continued to explore the 7th floor while mapping, until it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Ultimately, they were not able to find Oiso or these owners, and so they decided to stop the search for now and head to the surface through the gate. They would go to a store so that they could sell the silver wolf materials. That being said, Haruki's main goal was to find Oiso, and so he had only gotten materials for 50 wolves. They had actually fought many more than that, but Garen's magic had blown them up into tiny pieces. This was only a sixth of what they usually got. Chapter 36.2 Haruki felt dissatisfied by just how quickly he was able to take everything out of the bag. No, maybe it was because he wasn't selling them to Akane. When Haruki first appeared at the store, the clerk had shrieked in fear, but then, as if making a decision, or steeling herself, she nodded and got straight to work. As for the quote, "We have fur and fangs. This is the total amount. Does this suit you?" The total was 44,100 yen, and from here, we will give you an exclusive bonus. The clerk tapped on a calculator until the final number came out as 46,305 yen. Haruki signed the papers and both of their cards were topped up with their share. "Ah, Karaboshi. The product you ordered is completed, so please stop by the weapons and armor store next door." "Sure." "Wait, what order? Could it be the werewolf dagger?" "No, it couldn't be." It hadn't even been half a month since the stampede. Novel by N.com. He had been told that it would take a full month. If it was ready, he probably wouldn't even be able to equip it. What was it then? Haruki tilted his head and walked to the store. He could have just asked the clerk before going, but Haruki decided not to. It was like that moment that you opened a present from Santa. It was more exciting and fun to open it without knowing what was inside. Of course it was. "Welcome." Karaboshi. "Why do you know my name?" That was something he couldn't ignore. And so a confused Haruki had asked the clerk. Both this store and the last store. He hadn't even said his name once, and yet they both knew it. Obviously, he had never met either of them before, and he had no idea why they should know his name. "Oh, Yuzuki told me, if the masked pervert appears, treat him well, because he's my underling." That is what she said. "Underling? I am not her underling." And he wasn't a masked pervert either. He was a gentleman with a mysterious mask. That's all. We're enemies who constantly tear money out of each other's hands. I'm not her underling or her friend. From Haruki's words, you could imagine a situation where he sold her materials and he was forced to buy weapons. "I'm not surprised, even though we are far away. It seems that she hasn't changed," the clerk said with a laugh. "It was Yuzuki who ordered it. The armor for you and Karen is complete, so please take a look at it." "Armor?" "Nope." He could not remember it. Haruki narrowed his eyebrows as the clerk came out of the storage room while pushing a cart. There were two black breastplates on the cart. On the top right, there was a middle-class logo Yaki carved into it. It was above Haruki's current equipment in both price and quality. When had he asked for such a high-quality breastplate? There was something in his mind that bothered him, but he couldn't remember what it was. It was very annoying. These breastplates were made with the shell of centipedes. "Would you like to try them on?" "Oh, centipedes." Upon hearing those words, something connected in Haruki's mind, and he clapped his hands. Haruki used to hunt rare centipedes and sell the materials to Akane. When doing this, he had given 2 of the carapaces to Akane to keep, just in case he could use them later on. To think that they would come out here. Well, it was actually perfect timing. Everything after the 8th floor of Chikaho was an area that Haruki had never stepped into. Even if the monsters that appeared were silver wolves, the chances of death would still increase. This centipede armor was guaranteed to be stronger than the millipede armor, which meant the danger of dying would be that much reduced. Perhaps Akane had ordered them as soon as she learned of Oiso's disappearance. She might have predicted that it would be Haruki who would go searching for her. "It's pretty impressive." Haruki sighed as he equipped the centipede breastplate. "Yes, Yuzuki is actually very skilled. She takes the customer's preference into account when preparing products. She's an expert when it comes to equipment for adventurers." "Actually very skilled. Huh." There seemed to be some hidden meaning there. Haruki couldn't help but chuckle. Of course, the clerk was not lying when she said the word expert. The skill to be able to order armor that fit the customer just right, after only looking at them, was something that any company would value. That being said, what made her especially brilliant was that she was able to prepare the best equipment for an adventurer, just when they think that they'll need it. "Yes, it's perfect." Haruki put the breastplate on and marveled at how comfortable it was. It was completely different from the millipede one. The weight, the flexibility, the hardness, the mobility it offered. He had been amazed when he first put on the millipede armor as well, but this centipede armor was superior in every way. That was middle class. The Yaki logo was there for a reason. "What about you, Karen? It fits perfectly, Karen said as she looked down with a look of dismay. Why did she seem disappointed that her breastplate fit perfectly? While he had been a little worried if they would be capable of equipping the centipede armor, Haruki and Karen were able to do it without any trouble. Chapter 36.3 There was no penalty, such as feeling heavier. So, how much for both of them? You don't need to pay for anything. What do you mean? It's covered as necessary expenses. Then her face turned serious as she brought her face closer to Haruki. Updated from novel by Ent.com. We asked a lot of adventurers for help, but due to Oiso going down there of her own accord, and because it was so soon after the stampede, no one lent us a hand. All the strong adventurers are headed off to Shinjuku Station, and the others wouldn't be able to reach the 8th layer. Mr. Karaboshi, you are the only one who would accept the quest. Both of you. Haruki wanted to tilt his head to the side after hearing this. This was the biggest city in Hokkaido. Was it even possible that there were no adventurers who would accept the quest? He could understand if this was for the lower layers, but this was on the higher layers. Beginner adventurers were able to go up to the 9th floor. There were many in Sapporo who could do that. On top of that, the client was a big company. It didn't seem likely that no one would accept it. However, if that's what she was saying, then it must be true. And so Haruki pushed his doubts to the corner of his mind. Please find Oiso for us. Okay. She was probably thinking about the worst case scenario already. He could see a resolve in her eyes. Whether he brought back the bones or didn't find anything at all, she would not be shaken. I'll do my best. With renewed determination, Haruki left the store behind him. And in his heart, he pleaded to Oiso. They care about you so much, and so, do everything you can to survive. The road to becoming a noticeable being. The rescue. Hello, it's Ero. I've been hunting silver wolves for a while. It was scary at first, but now I'm used to it. In fact, they're kind of cute. That's what I think these days. I wonder if there's a way to keep them as pets. Greater than _ They seem like they'd make really good watchdogs. Oh carrot, bark, bark. I accepted a quest and came down to the Chikaho dungeon. The search starts today. Greater than _ We have to search between the 6th and 8th floors. As we're not strong enough to rush through the area, we plan to slowly increase the field of search. But I'll do my best to be quick. I'll find you no matter what, so please stay safe until then. I worked hard leveling up again today. Now, maybe I'm one step closer to being noticeable. Maybe. Shrimp grab a thread where we talk about Chikaho 89 Festival. 67 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Hey, I saw the masked man today. 68 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. What's that? 69 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. I think it's that guy that Masatsugu talked about before. 70 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Details. 71 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. That mask was weird. The kind that you know immediately that the person is messed up. He didn't have much of a presence, but the mask did. It was like the mask was floating in the air. Lol. 72 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. What the hell? That's scary. Did he seem strong? 73 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. His equipment was a combination of old and new. Maybe he cleared the higher levels. 74 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Huh, that's surprisingly normal. Still, a guy wearing a mask. Was there such a guy in Sapporo before? 75 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. He might be one of those people that live near a countryside dungeon. After all, I've never seen him before. 76 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. I see. That's possible. Try talking to him if you see him again. 77 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Got it. If he seems strong, I'll invite him to the team. 78 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Don't do that. He's clearly nothing special. He won't be impressive. 79 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Is this the first time hosting here? Well, have some tea and pull up a chair. 80 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. No, really. He's just a weakling. Masatsugu only talked to him because of the incident. 81 Name, Beware of Bears, Deer, and Anonymous. Incident? Oh, when the adventurer suddenly attacked another adventurer. I heard rumors that a certain team member had a bone to pick. Does this masked guy have a lot of baggage? 82 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. That was the masked guy's fault. Maybe he wanted to fight the other team. He whispered rumors into Masatsuga's ear, something about abandoning beginners or unsheathing their weapons first. 83 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. 82 You sure know a lot. Are you related? 84 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. I just saw it up close. That masked man. He was talking very loud, after all. 85 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. So, we shouldn't get involved with him? 86 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. Of course not. People like that who think Arasli will always end up dying in the dungeon. So leave him alone and don't get involved. 87 Name, beware of bears, deer, and anonymous. 86 I see. Understood. So, who the hell are you? Chapter 37.1 Let's explore Chikaho's 8th floor. The next day, Haruki woke up and immediately turned on the computer that he had borrowed from the hotel. How many page views do I have here? Shockingly, he had as many as 12 views. He usually only had 3 visitors, but he had 3 new visitors for a total of 6. Not only that, but there were 10 comments. Oh, could it be that I'm going to die today? Should such happiness really be allowed in this life? He felt like he could ascend up to heaven at any moment now. Haruki cleared his mind and then looked down at the comment section. What he saw: a wimp who thinks he can accept quests. Lol. Don't get so ahead of yourself, small fry. Your writing style is creepy. Sumyone's life is on the line. How dare you use emoticons? Are you mocking the person who got lost? People die in the dungeon, and yet just cracking jokes. This guy is insulting the victim. You should quit being an adventurer. Leave Japan. Die edi. A host of heartless and anonymous comments was what awaited him. Haruki clenched his fists and shook. Damn. His face became red as he suddenly stood up from his chair. What a great start to this day. I've been blessed by God, he shouted. He was shaking with joy. Of course, the comments were not praising him. They were attacking him. Haruki understood this very well. It was not something you would usually be happy about. However, if he was just air, no one would attack him. The comments were aggressive, not passive. They read his post and took the time to write down those words and send them. In other words, these comments could only be received if they were willing to pay the price and spend their own time. You could not receive comments if you weren't seen. That's why Haruki was shaking with happiness. Even if they were attacking him, an opinion was an opinion. He was now the kind of adventurer who could receive comments. Haruki was shaking as he breathed passionately. Oh, no. He was wasting precious time. He needed to reply to the comments. Haruki started hitting the keyboard furiously. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have received your comment. Thank you for your input. I agree with you. I will consider your advice. Thank you. Thank you so much. He replied to all the comments and sighed. Who knew that getting a reaction would feel so amazing? All right. I'm going to do my best today as well. Haruki did not stop smiling as he returned to exploring the 7th floor. As the centipede armor was middle class, it was incredibly comfortable. He didn't feel like he was in danger at all when he played with the Silver Wolves. Also, his magic sword saw improvements after the succession of battles. The blade had been straight when he first picked it up, but currently, there was a 1 centimeter curve from the base to the tip. This meant it was a little bit harder to use, but it was also noticeably sharper. This is good. Real good. He watched for openings in the Silver Wolf's defenses as he smiled and dodged the attacks. Danger! Haruki jumped back immediately. A white mass passed by him. In an instant, the heads of the 3 Silver Wolves exploded at the same time. Whoa! Haruki stood in stunned silence at this horrible reality. It was too much. He had wanted to play a little longer. Karaboshi, let's go and continue the search. Yes. Haruki instinctively replied to Karen, whose voice was filled with enthusiasm. However, he had to say it. Karen, that attack just now. It was pretty dang. Karaboshi, leave the attacking to me. I can take down the Silver Wolves with just 1 attack. And I can do it safely with ranged attacks. So, let's go. Yes. Haruki was overwhelmed by her spirit. Well, she was right. If they could defeat monsters in 1 hit, that would mean that they could explore quickly and safely. However, they were a team. He couldn't just let her do everything. Still, Haruki decided to leave all of the attacking to Karen, and he would just follow her lead. Haruki had very little experience with people following his movements, as he was too airy. No one would notice him, and so there was no use in even trying to follow him. And so Haruki mostly found himself following other people. When he was in gym class or at work or driving, he always moved as if going between other people. The source of this content November L/N, and so he was better at following others than having others follow him. Huh? Since when were you here? Or what? For some reason, I did more work than I thought. No matter how much he supported, no one would notice Haruki. No. He shouldn't think about that. It would only break his heart. Just try not to hit me with magic, alright? Yes, I'll take the appropriate steps. Why couldn't she say something more assuring? It was scary. Karen was filled with an enthusiasm that she had never felt before. It was no wonder, since her skills had gone up. But that wasn't the only reason that she was so excited. The biggest reason was that she was on a quest to save someone. Haruki had tried to reject it at first. However, Karen had been saved in Chikaho by Haruki before, and so, if it were possible, she wanted to help Oiso, who was likely in a similar position. It was because she was saved, she wanted to help save others. That's why she had gone against him. It was pretty much her insistence that had caused Haruki to accept it. He had been the one to make the decision. But it was Karen that had led him to it. If she didn't do her best now, she would be no different from a spoiled child. Besides, she hadn't paid Haruki back for saving her. As long as they were a team, she needed to be as useful as possible. She could pay him back by becoming stronger. It was naive perhaps, but that was how Karen felt. And now, she had gained power through the skill board. This was the time she had been waiting for. A perfect chance to repay the debt. There was no way that she could contain her excitement. Chapter 37.2 She was more excited than ever as she killed monsters so that Haruki could take it easy. And then, she would save Oiso, just as she had once been saved. Karen felt renewed vigor as she used her staff to turn the silver wolves into mincemeat. Haruki descended the dungeon following Karen, who crushed the silver wolves with a single hit. He lured the wolves until her power had charged up, and when he felt that she was about to fire, he would step back and retreat. As they had a lot of experience together, it didn't take Haruki long to match his movements to Karen's. As they were synchronized for an attack that killed in one hit, it seemed like they were killing more today than the previous day. Thanks to that, they were able to explore more of the 7th floor by midday. However, they were unable to find Oiso. I guess she really did go to the 8th floor. It seems like it. The 8th floor had the same monsters as the 7th floor, only there were less silver wolves and more owners. So the difficulty shot up on that floor. It can't be helped. Let's take out the boss and head to the 8th floor. Yes, he would have preferred it if they didn't have to go down to the 8th floor. However, there was nothing they could do, if that was where Oiso had gone. If her goal was just getting silver wolf materials, there was no need for her to go to the 8th floor where there were fewer of them. Either she had some other aim, or some unexpected incident had caused her to go there, or perhaps she just needed some other materials. In any case, Oiso encountered danger of some sort and had been unable to reach the gate. The request was for them to search up until the 8th floor. If they couldn't find her there, that meant they would have to go back and search the 6th floor again, and if they still couldn't, he would have to make a report. He preferred to not have to share bad news. After defeating the boss, they activated the gate and continued onward. It didn't take long for a silver wolf to appear. While they were called silver wolves at this point, their fur was closer to black. Not only that, but their physical ability also seemed to have increased from the 7th floor. The difference was even clearer in comparison to the 6th floor. He dodged attacks, defended, parried, cut when there was an opening, and kicked. When Haruki kicked them into the air, Karen unleashed her magic, killing the silver wolves. Good. This was very good. They worked together very well. These monsters were no match for them. It happened just as his confidence had reached such a level. A new pack of monsters appeared in front of Haruki. Their hands were strangely long. These were demi-humans, ugly monsters that appeared on the shallowest floors in Japan. They were called owners, and this one appeared with 2 silver wolves. The reason that they were called owners was because of how they roamed. They always moved with a silver wolf in tow, and since they looked like a person walking their dog, they were called owners. Karen, back off. Yes. Haruki unsheathed his 2 daggers and prepared to fight. Question mark. Something was strange. Haruki watched them with a puzzled expression. The silver wolves and the owner were not attacking them. The reason for this might have been the number of wounds. The silver wolves had numerous cuts on their bodies. The owner also had some wounds, but not as much as the silver wolves. They escaped from a hunt, Haruki thought with annoyance. Unlike the garage dungeon, other adventurers visited Chikaho. Adventurers hunted monsters, but sometimes they didn't finish the job. Maybe they were injured or their weapons broke. There were various reasons that would cause them to run away, and these monsters that were wounded were now left to wander the dungeon. With these wounds, their hatred for humans would only grow. Haruki had never fought a wounded monster before, but it was said that they were more dangerous than a monster that was unharmed. Karen. Yes, I'll leave the attacks to you. Such was the will that was in his voice, and Karen nodded reassuringly. 1 second after the two groups saw each other, a ball of death passed before Haruki. Ugh, Kyan. Thanks to the enemy being very cautious, there was plenty of time for Karen to charge up her attack. She charged her attack for 1 second for each enemy. The silver wolves were hit in the legs and body, and those parts were blown away. They were still breathing after the attack, but they could not get up. Updated from Novelbin. It was clearly a mortal wound. However, in spite of them being such powerful attacks, the owner hadn't taken that much damage. The owner raised one hand to its face, which had been hit, and then it raised its other long arm. Its rage was clearly directed towards Karen. I won't let you. Haruki moved in between them. He would tear away the hatred that had been directed towards her. Haruki lunged forward angrily and swung his two daggers with all of his strength. They should have gone into the owner's ribs, but they were blocked by its nimble movements. Instead, his attacks cut into the owner's arms. However, they did almost no damage. The magic blade had created a 1 centimeter cut, at least, but the silver wolf dagger did nothing. Haruki had killed so many silver wolves up until now, and yet none of his attacks were effective on the owners. It was no wonder. The owners had abilities that far outstripped those monsters on the upper floors. They were demi-human monsters that would be more at home on the center floors. After Haruki's attacks finished, the owner's arm swung to the side. Grr! Exclamation mark. Haruki instantly raised his daggers and kicked the dirt. At the same time, heavy, intense impact. His vision shook. His daggers screeched. His teeth ground together. This was how bad it was. In spite of the lost momentum, his arm was slightly numb from the attack. It would be better if he didn't get hit then. However, his opponent had very long arms, and if there was too much distance between them, he would not be able to hit it with his daggers. On top of that, its attacks were very strong. He would surely be knocked unconscious if he was hit even once. But even if he was careful and dodged all of its attacks, the enemy was too tough, and he couldn't deal any damage. And this owner was a demi-human. That meant it was more intelligent than any of the monsters they had fought up until now. It could also learn during combat. He couldn't use the same strategy multiple times. This would be a difficult fight. However, the higher the difficulty, the more interesting it would be. Haruki laughed. Yes, this was good. As he laughed, his mind went deep into the lower layers. He concentrated, collected, observed, imagined, predicted, and tested its muscles. He saw the way it shifted its weight. 1 and 2. He read its preliminary actions. Was it due to its intelligence? It had more patterns than any monster before it. Still, Haruki recorded each movement carefully. Recorded and remembered. TSK. One of its attacks scratched his chest. The impact caused him to lose his balance. His knees almost bent. But he wasn't injured. The centipede breastplate was doing its job. Haruki stood his ground. Just after the owner attacked, he slashed at it 3 times. Not enough. The wounds weren't deep. The damage was low. Was it the way that he was attacking? He memorized its movement patterns while changing the angle of his blade. 4 degrees. 5 degrees. He increased the number of steps for every hit. Haruki could feel a tingling at his neck the closer he got to the owner. He believed in his senses as he kicked the dirt. At that moment, a mass of compressed magical energy shot past him. And then the impact. Either she missed or it dodged the attack. The magic just barely scraped its head and then disappeared in the back. As expected, as they had put points into the magic energy tree, Karen just needed time, and her attacks would do enough damage. However, it also made the enemy that much more angry. Blood dripped down the side of its face. The owner glared at Karen through its thin, black eyes. Greg, Karen. Chapter 38.1. Let's survive without abandoning hope. Karen, stop attacking. Fall back. Yes. Karen obeyed Haruki's direction without question. Apparently, she had panicked a little when the enemy's hatred had been directed towards her. Her voice was a little high-pitched. She wouldn't last a second if the owner got close to her. And so Haruki went in on the attack in order to distract it. Updated from novel by N.com. He would not allow it to get past him. Here, his daggers wouldn't be enough, and so Haruki used his legs to deal extra damage. The more he attacked, the more shallow wounds appeared on the owner's arms. However, he found that there was one wound that was especially big. He rewound the footage that he had recorded of the attack in his brain and compared it with the wound. There it was. It was 5 attacks ago. It had done slightly more damage than the others. However, it was at the end of 3 successive attacks. It was a descending attack that matched the enemy's counterattack. It wasn't a particularly good attack compared to his usual ones. And yet, it had still cut the deepest. What made that attack different? But Haruki was now thinking of too many things at once, and that wasn't good. Kaha, Karaboshi. He heard Karen scream, and in the next moment, the world seemed to spin around him. The breath left him. He tried to inhale but found it difficult. His vision shook. Haruki ground his teeth as he slowly stood up. As his attention had momentarily shifted from the fight, he had been hit head-on by one of the owner's attacks. If he was fighting against a silver wolf, there would have likely been a follow-up attack. But the owner did not pursue him. This was because, though he was in severe pain, Haruki had met him with a counter. The owner must have been surprised. Up until now, all of Haruki's attacks had been at a level that didn't threaten its survival. Still, the counter just now had torn off a third of its arm. As the owner was smart, it was also cautious. It was cautious, and so it hesitated. Haruki smiled mischievously. Haruki was able to deal so much damage to the owner because he had done the same thing that he did during his fight against the werewolf. He matched the force of his opponent's attack. And one other thing. A circular movement had been added to Haruki's attack. The end of the blades of Japanese swords and knives consisted of small, concentrated jagged edges. That meant that you couldn't cut by just pressing. You had to move it like a saw in order to start cutting. Push and pull. A circular movement allowed you to do both at the same time. Western swords cut meat with weight, but a dagger had no weight, and so by using the circular motion, it finally became a weapon that was as sharp as it could be. He tested his theory without hesitation and swung his weapon in a circle. And like that, Haruki had cut deeply into the owner's body. That being said, owners had incredible defensive ability. The bones of silver wolves would have been severed after just pushing against them. But even after adding the circular motion and increasing its sharpness, his attack was stopped. Still, he was now more than capable of winning. All right. I want to see more. Haruki licked his lips and approached the owner once again. He had now seen all of its patterns of dealing with attacks. Now, he just needed to see how the owner would react to attacks that would be dangerous if they landed. He cut, thrust, dodged, kicked, and circled. He matched Karen's movements and pushed in all at once. It was easy for Haruki to handle the owner, now that it was confused about how potent his counterattack had been. At the same time, Karen supported Haruki with her powerful magic. After that, the fight became very one-sided. It still took some time, but Haruki succeeded in defeating the owner. Just as the owner breathed its last breath, he felt his body grow hot. It had been a while, but he was feeling very sick after leveling up. Haruki held his head in his hands as he leaned against the wall. He had been fighting for 5 minutes. While his stamina had been raised to 2. He was completely out of breath after just a 5-minute fight. It was likely due to extreme nervousness and concentration. A similar phenomenon had happened during his fight against the werewolf. His breath was hot. His body was heavy. But it was good. He felt amazing. As he had been fighting nothing but silver wolves for a while, it was refreshing to be able to fight a different monster. On top of that, the owners were just the right difficulty for Haruki, difficult but still manageable. Yes, it was so good. He was on an adventure. You weren't on an adventure if there wasn't some danger. Yes, this was the way that it should be. That being said, they were currently searching for Oiso. This was no time to be taken up by this adventure stuff. This would be great for leveling, but we don't have much time right now. We should try and avoid combat as we continue to search. I agree. Karen had beads of sweat on her forehead. If someone else attacked now, she would probably just run away. Chapter 38.2 Haruki put down his bag and started to prepare. Karen, sorry, but he'll need you to carry this as we move. Eyes. What? What Haruki had taken out was black, long, and slimy. Karen looked at it and shrank back. What is that? Just a slimy eel. What? I said it's a slimy eel. Karen looked at him suspiciously. Karaboshi. I didn't know that you had a thing for making girls carry such things. Her cold stare was rather painful. Number. It wasn't like that, okay? Apparently, it keeps monsters away. It's effective for one day. A monster repellent. But then, why didn't you use this from the beginning? Because I thought that if it was possible to kill them quickly and advance, it would be better. But now I know that the owners take too much time to fight. It had been 5 minutes. 7 minutes if you included the time they rested. As they were currently searching for Oiso, they could not spend so much time on each fight. I doubt the effect is perfect, so we should still remain cautious. Yes. Karen sounded depressed. Apparently, just touching the slimy eel was enough to chip away at your mental strength. Why was she so upset? It was just a little slimy, that's all. Haruki tilted his head in puzzlement. As for himself, he thought that two were bound to be more effective than one, and so he carried slimy eels in both hands. So, Karen said hesitantly from behind him. Why are you, carrying Ria? During their break, Haruki had taken Ria out of the magic bag, and now he was carrying the planter in his own bag. As there was a pot in his bag, half of Ria now stuck out of the bag. I thought she could be like a shoulder cannon. Karen sighed with exasperation over this answer. If the slimy eel didn't work on the owner, they would be forced to fight. Of course, as they had been able to defeat it before, it was likely that they'd be able to do it again, as long as they weren't taken by surprise. Still, it wouldn't be an easy fight, and so that's where Ria would come in. Ria's throwing was strong enough to pierce the enemy. With this, it would be even easier to take out the owners. And since the pot was at the bottom of the bag, Ria could continuously replenish her bullets. That meant she could use her throwing attacks without the worry of running out of ammunition. As for Ria herself, in spite of the possibility of fighting a monster being very real, she was grabbing Haruki's shoulder with her vines and swaying her head around. She was not bothered at all. Besides, I'm carrying eels in both hands, so I can't exactly attack at a moment's notice. And I suppose there was no option for you to keep one hand free? Exactly. No argument. When it came to safety, it was better to be excessive. Karen gave him a look that seemed to say, see, I knew it was just your fetish. But Haruki ignored her and continued to search for Oiso. After walking for some time, a monster appeared in front of them. Be careful. Ria, don't attack just yet. Okay. Nod. Haruki held his breath and observed the owner and the silver wolves. Just then, one of the silver wolves noticed them. Their eyes met. It was just as Haruki thought. This. Hi. The silver wolf let out an adorable sound as it turned around and ran away. The owner looked at us in surprise. Jaya. Just like the silver wolf, the owner took one look at them and then turned around and ran as if to chase after the silver wolf. The slimy eels sure are amazing. I don't think that it's just them. What else could there be? If you haven't noticed, never mind. Could there be any other reason for them to run away? He had no idea. As Haruki tilted his head to the side, Karen shook hers and sighed. After that, it was almost funny how monsters would run away at the sight of them. I feel like I've become a really strong boss. A boss or maybe a mortal enemy. Haruki continued to map the area in his head as he watched the monsters run away frantically. The 8th floor was about double the size of the first floor. It would take 3 hours to get through it without fighting. On top of that, the grass that had started appearing since the 6th floor was now tall enough to reach their waist. Updated from novel by N.com. They would have to keep up their concentration, or they could miss Oiso. If she was still alive, it was possible that she was using some kind of magic tool to avoid being detected by the monsters, and if she were using such a tool while hiding in the grass, then even Haruki would be unable to find her, and so he kept his concentration up and avoided traps while moving through the dungeon. Oiso Seika was hiding in the grass on the 8th floor. If she could, she would have escaped a long time ago. However, her broken left foot would not allow it. Chapter 38.3 The pain had eased since it was first fractured. However, even now, any slight movement was so painful that she would probably end up screaming. If only I had brought some expensive potions. No, If only I didn't chase the silver wolves all the way here. Oiso had come down to the 8th floor in order to gather silver wolf materials. The reason was the difference in quality. With silver wolf fur, the darker it was, the higher the quality. However, they bought the fur for the same price regardless. Of course, this was a company secret. The adventurers had no idea about it. If they did make it public, they would lose their trust as a company. After all, they had been buying superior materials at a low price. Still, they had their reasons for doing it as well. If they paid more for the darker fur, then people would start to dye the silver wolf fur. That would make it harder to appraise them. Novel by N.com. And if appraising took longer, their profits would drop, and if their profits dropped, their prices would have to be raised. That wouldn't benefit anyone. And so Iakabashi bought the materials at the same price, even if the quality was different. The factory had asked Oiso for materials, and so she had gone out to hunt silver wolves, in order to be able to send out the amount that was ordered. However, she had also become greedy. If she were going to come out and gather them herself, then she might as well get materials that were of high quality. If she sent high-quality materials, the factory would think very highly of her. If you order from the Iakabashi store in Sapporo, you'll get high-quality materials. That's what they would say. She could pull ahead of the other stores. She could trample over the much-hated Yuzuki with real capability. And the result was this. The 8th floor had quite a few enemies that had escaped previous hunters. And Oiso had been surrounded by wounded silver wolves and an owner. While she tried to cut through them with her trusty long sword, she was one against many. The group of monsters were more vicious than usual, due to their wounds, and they slowly closed in on her. Still, Oiso fought hard. As she slowly backed away, she managed to kill a few of them. However, things turned bad very quickly. It was when she had let her guard down just for a second. Her long sword was ripped from her hand. On top of that, she tried to run, and only ended up falling into a pit, which resulted in a bone fracture. These were monsters that she should have been able to defeat, but now she was just desperate to run away. It was quite pathetic. She had now been in the dungeon for over a week. Her body was covered in sweat and dirt, but she didn't smell. She had sprinkled a concealment-type powder on herself that erased the smell. She probably wouldn't last a day without it. Hee. And so what? So what if she had survived? Oiso thought with self-deprecation. The way of the adventurer is found in death. It was rare for an adventurer to get lost in a dungeon and then be rescued. Adventurers were supposed to be a shield that protected people, and so their lives had the least weight of anyone in Japan. Unless you were especially valuable personnel, there would be no rescue team. Or you had to be a rank class. Oiso was neither, and so no one would come and help her. And yet, she was still trying to survive. There was something about it that felt terribly grotesque to her. Her own thoughtless actions had led her into this situation. That was bad enough, and on top of that, she was now sipping mud water in order to survive. She felt that it was starting to tarnish her soul. Wouldn't it be better to just die than continue on like this? Yes, this dark emotion almost started to feel like hope in her mind. On the other hand, there was also a bright light that seemed to shout at her, "Live just a little while longer, a little longer." She had meant to return in one day. She only had enough food for 5 days. She had already run out of food. Now, it was just about the magic that erased her presence. How much longer would it last? She should just die. Oiso had been thinking this, but then she thought about what would happen after the effect expired, and she shivered. It nearly drove her crazy, but she didn't even have enough energy to become crazy. No, she didn't want to die. Not yet. Now that it was close and she could see it clearly, Oiso became afraid of death. Her body shook, and so she wrapped her arms around herself. Tears fell from her eyes and a moan escaped her lips. Her tears fell to her parched lips. It stung the wounds there. It was ridiculous that she was losing valuable moisture through crying. On top of it all, her throat was completely dry. It was hard to even mumble. However, Oiso couldn't stop crying. She couldn't help it. Help. Just then, the grass that she was hiding in started to move unnaturally. Was it a monster? Oiso looked shocked. However, there was no strength left in her. She could only look in the direction that the sounds were coming from. She had to accept her horrible fate of being eaten by monsters. "I finally found you." What appeared before her? His hands were 2 slimy tentacles, and on his back was a writhing plant monster. What appeared before her? A floating, Evil mask of the devil. Oiso screamed as if to let out the last bit of energy that she had. Then her eyes rolled into her head and she lost consciousness. Chapter 39.1. Let's send the lost adventurer back to the surface. Hey, Karen. Why did she just faint? Haruki was so confused that she had suddenly screamed and then lost consciousness. I think that it's because of you, Karaboshi. Me? His eyes widened. However, when he thought back on it, it did kind of make sense. She had been stuck in this dungeon for so long. Even though they had come to rescue her, he had suddenly appeared without saying anything. So being surprised was pretty much reflex. Well, never mind. Karen, get the potion. From what he could see, there were no deadly wounds. However, her left leg was bent in an odd direction. It was a bad fracture. She would not be able to walk. Haruki accepted the expensive potion from Karen, and then slowly poured it into Oiso's mouth. She must have been very thirsty. Even though she was unconscious, she drank down the liquid. After she had drunk everything, Haruki quickly treated her ankle. Alright, there. Ga-aga. As he twisted the broken ankle, the unconscious Oiso groaned loudly. Karaboshi, what are you doing? She won't be able to walk properly if it heals while it's bent, right? Even if it's a very strong potion, it doesn't return everything back to a natural state. If Haruki didn't do something, the bone would reconnect in the wrong position. And if that happened, she wouldn't be able to walk even if she was healed. They would have to break the bone again and reconnect it. As Haruki held the ankle in the right position, he could feel the insides move as they grew hotter. It was healing at a rapid rate. These expensive ones sure are impressive. It was good that she was healing quickly, but he hoped that there wouldn't be any dangerous side effects. After a while, he stopped feeling any movement in the leg, and the heat started to subside. And then about 20 minutes passed before Oiso opened her eyes. She fainted again. Hey, huh? Haruki flicked her on the face and Oiso was forced back into consciousness. Karaboshi, that's not very nice. Well, she won't be able to move if she faints. They were barely making it in terms of combat ability. If they had to carry her on top of that, they would not survive an enemy ambush. Are you awake? Stop fainting. He did a karate chop, which somehow managed to prevent her from fainting. Oiso, aren't you? Yes. What do you wait? Are you going to do this and that even though you're a demon? TSK, die. Sorry to interrupt you, but we got to go. As her health had recovered after drinking the potion, her energy was now going in a strange direction. Could this be the side effect? I'm Haruki. And this is Karen. We accepted a quest to come and save you. A quest? Yeah. An Yakibashi employee is waiting for your return! Exclamation mark. Perhaps Haruki's words had given her a hint. Oiso stopped breathing, and her eyes filled with tears. Can you stand? My leg it's healed? It should be. Do you think that you can stand up? Yes, I think I can. Oiso stood up hesitantly. She must have realized that it didn't hurt to put her weight on it anymore. Her eyes were wide as she nodded repeatedly. You healed my leg. I don't know how I can thank you enough. You can thank your company. I just bought the potion with their money. I see. Well, thank you for preparing it. Regardless, we have to go. Haruki was feeling awkward, now that he was receiving words of gratitude. And so he suddenly turned on his heels and walked towards the gate to the 8th floor. While Oiso was healed, her energy was still pretty low. It was clear that they weren't moving as fast as when it was just the two of them. But it was fine, because they had the slimy eels. Still, Haruki couldn't help but worry. It was always more dangerous after you rescued someone than it was before, especially inside of a dungeon. New novel chapters are published on. And so he remained very careful and used his detection abilities to the limit. But in spite of Haruki's worries, the monsters took one look at the eels and then vanished in the blink of an eye. They must really hate eels. It was almost like they were traumatized by them. And so, due to Haruki swinging the eels above his head, they managed to reach the gate without being attacked by a single monster. Phew. Now we just need to use the gate to go up. They saw the small room with the gate, and since there were no monsters around, Haruki finally allowed himself to relax a little. That's when it happened. Gaha. What? Garen's cough and Oiso's nervous shout echoed around them. Haruki immediately turned around. What he saw. Hey, it's been a while. It was the SHIELD team that had once abandoned Karen. Lars was standing after having swung his sword. In front of him, Karen stood. The back of her robes was covered in blood. Shikama was looking down at Karen with eyes full of hate. You finally came, and it was well worth the wait. Haruki ignored this greeting and reached for his dagger. Oh, I wouldn't move if I were you. Shikama's lips curled into a smile as he pointed with his thumb. Haraya was standing there with a bow and a knocked arrow. If he moved now, the arrow would come flying for sure. But if Haruki was the target, he could dodge it. However, it was pointed at Karen. Damn it. Haruki had no choice but to freeze his movements. Oiso over there did a really great job. I didn't expect her to actually come down here to gather materials herself, but the results were alright. Huh? Don't sell your materials at that store. That's what I told them. And everyone listens to me if I use Masatsugu's name. It's all thanks to him for keeping us close by. Is that why fewer people were selling to us? You've taken way too long to realize it. Chapter 39.2 Gahahaha. Shikama and Lars laughed disgusting. They were no longer on their guard. However, it was not the same with Haraya. He just smiled, but he remained attentive. There was no opening. What a terrible thing to use Masatsugu's name for. In spite of having a great sword pointed at her, Oiso was enraged. And it wasn't because he had plotted so that her store wouldn't get any materials. It was because he had misused the name value of someone as famous as Masatsugu. As the top ranker, Masatsugu wasn't just an adventurer. He was someone who carried all the hopes of the country. This act was the equivalent of smearing mud on his face. And Oiso could not forgive that. It was Kawasaki that was currently sponsoring Masatsugu, but he had many fans in Yakibashi as well. Many people believed that he was the one who would erase all of the dungeons from Japan. The very thought of using his name to put pressure on other adventurers. I like your spirit. However, still the Wimpu had their ass kicked by some wounded silver wolves and their owner. So shut up! I was actually hoping the request to gather materials would go to air. There aren't many people who can hunt on the 8th floor, and so I told everyone to avoid accepting quests at your store. If you ran out of materials, then air would eventually be asked to go. After all, air is always around that Yuzuki person. That was true. Oiso nodded inwardly. Yuzuki was younger than Oiso and had a shorter history with the company. However, she had the highest performance in the company by far. She was a good employee who quickly learned about being an adventurer. And while her attitude was both overbearing and careless, she was very detail-oriented when it came to her work. Of course, Yuzuki would know that Oiso wanted Silver Wolf materials, and so she had repeatedly made attempts to send materials she got in K-Town to her. However, Oiso's pride had prevented her from accepting this kindness, and she continued to reject the offer. Surely she could manage it herself. That was what she had thought. Of course, Oiso was deeply remorseful for her actions now. Had she not cared about her pride so much, she would not have gotten lost out here. Not only that, but their awful plan might have been stopped, had she accepted the products. Now that she knew, she was filled with so much anger that her body could not stop shaking. Do you think that you can get away with doing such a thing? Get away with it? We haven't done anything wrong, have we? Don't be ridiculous. When the others find out that you've been purposely wounding monsters so they will attack other adventurers, you'll face worse than just having your license revoked. Huh? What makes you think you'll ever get to leave this dungeon? He was crazy. Oiso was overwhelmed by the madness and savagery of the man. Hey, Shikama, why don't we have some fun? First, Lars, do you ever think of anything else? Well, whatever. Oiso is pretty old, though. Do you really not mind? I prefer it. Then Haraya will get the old one. As for me, I'll take the 18-year-old Karen. A virgin. Aren't you? I'll show you what a real man is like. You won't be able to live without my great sword after this. I think you mean dagger, you idiot. Shut up, you sheathed knife. Hee. The guys cackled with their disgusting words. It was gross. It was horrible. The urge to vomit was now stronger than her anger. Adventurers were supposed to protect the land, the people, and the future. Could they really be so despicable? She still couldn't believe what she was hearing. She wanted to think it was all a bad joke. However, it wasn't a misunderstanding or a joke. Their eyes were serious. Adventurers gain power by defeating monsters. That power was like speech or politics or money. The power to force was authority, People got twisted when great authority was acquired too easily. Just like a veteran helped instruct newer employees at work, it was the job of adventurers to help reform adventurers who had gone astray. Like Masatsugu, most adventurers had painful experiences and followed the examples of other adventurers and slowly learned to control their magic. However, there were some rare adventurers like Shikama and the others, who got drunk on their power. This was Oiso's first time seeing an adventurer like this. Their madness caused her to shake. Clack clack, clack clack, question mark. That wasn't coming from her. Oiso heard the odd sounds and furrowed her brows. Well, let's kill the real Dagger Boy fine hour. Wow. Karen had fainted after being hit by the great sword, but she was now awake. The man with the great sword noticed the change, and then kicked her in the jaw as if it was the most natural thing. The impact caused her eyes to roll up into her head. No, Oiso was at a loss for words. But she quickly returned to herself. There was one thing she could do in this situation. She wouldn't let things go their way. Haruki, run away and call the special police you? She turned around and shouted. However, Haruki was nowhere to be seen. He had been the closest to the room with the gate. Perhaps he had escaped already? To think that he'd abandon his team members and escape. Were all adventurers like this? For a second, Oiso's head was full of anger. However, he wasn't entirely wrong either. Maybe he had gone to call the special police. If word of this got outside, surely someone would come and help them. Many of the good adventurers would come and stop this foolishness. She just had to believe and wait. Hey, air is gone. When did he get away? While Oiso pondered it calmly, the SHIELD team immediately grew frantic. It was no wonder. After all, Haruki seemed to have vanished in the blink of an eye. If he really had gone to the surface for help, the special police, who had been trained in the dungeon, would come and arrest them. Damn it. It's always like this. Let's go feed these women to the monsters. Hey, what about the sex? I don't think my great sword can handle it any longer. Shut up. We need to get rid of the evidence before the police arrive. Well, just say that he's lying. Okay, fine. I'll just have to swing my great sword in, says Yukino. Lars picked up his great sword. He would take no chances. They mostly moved on the 8th and 9th floors. They were a team that most people thought would be reaching the central layers soon. The level of experience was completely different from Haruki, Karen, and Oiso. He wouldn't hesitate to take a life. That's what amateurs did. As long as he got a critical hit, even owners would get cut in half by his sword. Updated from Novelbin. And it was this blade that moved towards Oiso. Goodbye, flashlight. The great sword swung down. Just then. What? Huh? The ground suddenly shook violently. Lars' grip on his sword weakened a little, and then, there was a high-pitched ring as the sword was blocked by something invisible. TSK, Oiso. Take Karen and run. Who? Hurry up and run. She could hear the voice but she couldn't see the person. However, Oiso knew who it was. It must be Haruki. He was going to save them. She moved immediately, pulling Garen's arm over her shoulder and then ran towards the gate. I won't let you. Frantically, Shikama moved to swing his long sword at their backs. However, don't move, or you'll die. Something cold and deadly touched his throat, and Shikama stopped. Still, he stayed calm. Haraya! Kill him! Shikama shouted, and Haraya unleashed the arrow. However, something shot out from the side and obliterated it. What? Their teamwork had been obstructed. As they watched in shock, Oiso and Karen disappeared through the gate. Chapter 40.1 Let's escape the disastrous situation. Haruki took off his mask in order to conceal himself as he blocked Lars' great sword. Even one hit would have resulted in a fatal wound, and the attack made Haruki's right hand feel numb. His teeth ground loudly, and his knees bent slightly from the weight of the attack. The reason that Haruki had been able to block the attack at all was not because he was physically superior to Lars. It was because the ground had shaken right before the attack. Had the sudden shaking not surprised Lars enough for him to weaken the force behind his swing, Haruki would not have been able to stop it. This wasn't all of his power, and yet the weight of the great sword caused a chill to go down Haruki's spine. Next, Haruki pointed his dagger at the neck of Shikama, who had just moved. It was just a light press, but Shikama's legs stopped completely. Haraya, kill him. The arrow moved in a straight line towards Karen and Oiso's backs. However, a potato stone shot from over Haruki's shoulder and hit the arrow out of the air. The power of Ria's throw easily caused the arrow to shatter into pieces. Good. Once he had confirmed that Karen and Oiso were out of the gate, Haruki sighed in relief. Of course, he continued to use Ria to ensure that the others did not move. If they tried, a potato stone would shoot at their feet, accompanied by an odd sound. In fact, Lars was currently dancing strangely. Where the hell is he? Damn it! Something starts shooting at my feet if I try to move. Show yourself, you bastard. I'm right in front of you? New novel chapters are published on. Haruki looked depressed as he waved to them. However, it was no use at all. It was no different if he raised his voice. They could not hear. Even Oiso had been able to hear him. Perhaps their detection skill was at 0. As for traps, there was nothing here but pitfalls, and there weren't that many either. As long as they used the shield bearer to keep the boss in one place during fights, pitfalls weren't really something they needed to worry about a lot. As the team was well balanced, they could use brute force to a certain extent without being in danger. So perhaps they had no need for the detection skill up until now. Haruki put the mask back on, deactivating conceal. Oh, how long were you there? He had been there all along. All along. Damn it. His knees almost bent due to how shocked he was. It's you again. How many times are you going to get in our way? I believe this is the first time. Don't pretend like you're not scared. Masatsugu isn't here this time. That's true. So, while they were provoking him, Haruki remained calm and still. You hurt my friends. You call yourselves adventurers? You're all trash. He could think of several ways to answer them, but in spite of those emotional words, Haruki's heart was calm. It almost made him doubt his own humanity. However, are you ready for what's going to come? The words held more hostility than Haruki had intended. Shikama and the others seemed to shrink back. What are you saying? We were just joking. We weren't really going to kill you, right? Yeah. Don't take things so seriously. I see. So, you weren't serious. Even after hearing this, Haruki found that his emotions remained completely unaffected. So, you weren't serious? But you still wounded Karen. That was an accident. Really, I didn't mean to hurt her that much. And you also kicked her in the jaw when she was about to wake up. What about that? Yeah, that was also an accident. We went too far, and I'm sorry about that. Really, I am. Okay, you'll forgive us, won't you? The words that Masatsugu had said to him, you should avoid coming to Chikaho for a while. Haruki had never forgotten them. Of course. He had known that it was possible that they'd be here, and he had gathered information about them online. However, he wanted to believe that Masatsugu would have disciplined them properly. He wanted to believe in the righteousness of adventurers. These were licensed adventurers. Surely there was something that remained deep inside of them. Surely they still believed that the power gained in the dungeon was to be used to help people. And so Haruki was horribly disappointed that they were still being targeted. I see. So, was writing all of those comments on my blog also a joke? What are you talking about? There were 10 comments insulting me, and 6 unique visitors. That means 3 more people than my regular readers. That's the same number as your team, isn't it? Did you really think that I wouldn't notice? Or did you not know that unique visitors were even a thing? So, your blog gets so few views. Chapter 40.2 I thought your replies were provoking me, and it pissed me off. But you really were grateful then. He gets so few comments that he even enjoys being insulted. Upon hearing this, the 3 of them looked at Haruki with immense pity and with tears in their eyes. Stop. Don't look at me like that. He had meant to push them further back, but now they seemed to be getting the upper hand. He should not have brought up his blog. Damn it. He would never talk about his blog again. It was still shaking. Just then, Haruki felt the ground shake a little and he raised his face. What was it? He sharpened his awareness and noticed the change immediately. You've got to be kidding me. The ceiling and walls started to move and distort. As they watched, the speed of distortion grew faster. What is this? What did you do? Shikama and the others realized the change as well, and they stared angrily at Haruki. However, Haruki hadn't done anything. However, he did have a good idea as to what was happening. A monster parade, he muttered. He would never have expected to encounter the start of a monster parade in a place like this. We have to run, Shikama shouted, and the 3 adventurers moved all at once. Of course, Haruki moved as well. Though, it was not to get his revenge. It was to run away. If he died now, it would be the end of everything. He wouldn't be able to make them pay for their crime and get them to reform. However, the parade started before they could get to the room with the gate. Damn it! 10 silver wolves dropped down from the dungeon ceiling and blocked their path. Scum! Last great sword flashed. In just one hit, 2 of the silver wolves were cut in half. However, in the time that it took him to kill 2 silver wolves, 3 more dropped down from the ceiling. As if things weren't bad enough, the owners were participating in the parade as well. Shit, this is bad. Once Haruki saw that he was at a disadvantage, he pulled out his skill board. Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill Point, 5. Class, Swordmaster. Vitality, Stamina 2. Natural Recovery 0. Strength, Strength 2. Agility, Quickness 1. Dexterity 2. Technique updated from Novelbin. Siom, Weapon Mastery. One-handed Sword 2-3, Throwing 1, Light Armor 1, Conceal 1, Imitate 1, Intuition, Detection 1, Special, Growth Acceleration 3, Tame 0. One-handed sword has gone up. After he discovered the most efficient way to attack during his battle with the owner, the power of Haruki's attacks had gone way up. He had noticed the difference and now saw that his skill really had been raised by 1 point after that fight. I guess it goes up when your movements become smooth there, or maybe you have to accumulate a certain amount of experience first. Also no. Haruki pushed those thoughts to the side. He was very curious. However, this was no time to think about such things. His fingers quickly slid over the screen as he used up his skill points. Karaboshi Haruki 27 Gender, Male. Skill Point, 5-0. Class, Swordmaster. Vitality, Stamina 2. Natural Recovery 0. Strength, Strength 2-3. Agility, Quickness 1-2. Dexterity 2. Technique, Weapon Mastery. One-handed Sword 3. Throwing 1, Light Armor 1, Conceal 1, Imitate 1, Intuition, Detection 1-2, Special, Growth Acceleration 3 Max, Tame 0. He raised Strength for damage and Quickness for attack speed. Detection would allow him to see attacks from all directions, and then he also increased Growth Acceleration, in order to enhance his still inadequate physical abilities during combat. There was no point in hoarding points if he died here, and so he used up all of them. What's that item using? It doesn't matter, just think about getting out of here. Haruki put the skill board away and pulled out his 2 daggers from their sheaths. The monsters still hadn't gone through the gate yet. Haruki threw down the slimy eels he was holding so that they blocked the gate entrance. The slimy eels were very effective against monsters on this floor, but they wouldn't do much during a monster parade. This was because, even if the monsters wanted to run away from the eels, the area was too dense with monsters, and there was nowhere to run. They would still try to avoid it, but you couldn't push your way through them. In that case, it would be best to secure a place to escape with the eels. Monsters didn't appear from within the gate room, but that didn't mean that they couldn't go inside. If he blocked the entrance with the slimy eels, the chances of them taking over the gate would be minimized. As long as the monsters didn't block the gate, they would be able to escape to the surface. When Haruki was able to confirm that the slimy eels were keeping the monsters away from the entrance, he attacked the 2 silver wolves that were the closest to him. Run to the gate. Don't order me around, you little shit, Shikama shouted angrily. 3 silver wolves seemed to react to his voice and attack him. Shikama kicked one of them and cut open another with his long sword. Then he used Shield Bash to send the other one flying. It was impressive. He was very skilled. Chapter 40.3. Even though he had raised his skills with the board, Haruki was finding it hard to follow the succession of attacks. But, a silver wolf approached from a blind spot and rammed into his side. The sound of breaking ribs echoed. As his detection ability was low, he had not been able to react to this attack from a blind spot at all. Shikama, leader, Lars and Haria's eyes widened as Shikama nearly fell to his knees. Concentrate, Haruki shouted. This was no time to be surprised. The monster parade had already started. Monsters were being born one after another in the passages. And they weren't just silver wolves. Obviously, there were owners as well. There was no way that they could let their guard down. Haruki had no intention of pardoning Shikama and the others. That being said, he wasn't going to let them die here either. No one deserved that. This reasoning would probably be considered naive. However, that was Haruki's backbone and something he wasn't going to change. "We're getting out alive." "Shut up, you insolent little shit, you damned scum." He was so loud that the silver wolves reacted. They attacked Jiraiya all at once. He knew how to move. Even when surrounded, he continued to unleash his arrows and dodge the attacks of the silver wolves. Haruki couldn't help but watch. He was firing arrows while dodging, and his aim was precise. And he was so quick when knocking arrows. The arrows hit the silver wolves without missing their vitals. Their numbers went down rapidly. However, once he had killed 20, he ran out of arrows. Jiraiya continued to dodge, but now that he couldn't kill them anymore, it was just a matter of time before they would overwhelm him. Gawah! Jiraiya had nowhere to run, and a silver wolf easily bit into his arm and tore it off. Damn it! Haruki ground his teeth. Adventurers on the upper floors tended to have powerful weapons but weak armor. Shikama was the advance guard, so he was different. But it was certainly the case with Lars and Jiraiya, and that was the cause of this fatal result. Things might have been different had he been wearing an entry model. Ag, Shikama, help me. Shit. Shikama was about to go and help him, when an owner's arm swung in the air and hit him straight on. It was another attack that was from a blind spot. However, this time he was able to react just a little. He planted his feet firmly on the ground and managed to avoid being blown into the air. However, that turned out to be a mistake. GGGR. The owner's attack had landed on the joint of his right arm, and now it was bent back at an unnatural angle. It was the kind of careless mistake that someone who was a shield bearer was likely to make. Instead of letting the force of the attack escape, he had accepted it, and that meant taking more damage than was necessary. Novel by N. He would not be able to hold his sword anymore. Shikama, Jiraiya, stand together with your backs against the wall. I'll open a path. He was an impressive attacker. He expertly used the centrifugal force of his great sword as he swung to cut through the horde of silver wolves as if they were paper. However, this attack lost all accuracy very quickly. When he was surrounded by so many monsters, he was no longer able to swing his great sword, which was the only way to make it do maximum damage. And just like that, Lars was unable to cut the monsters into blocks of meat. Damn it! He was forced to cut through the silver wolves with shorter swings. However, it took him too much time to swing downward, and his strokes were too slow. For every wolf he killed, 2 more would appear. The circle of monsters started to close round him. Shikama and the others had been able to set wounded monsters on Oiso. That's how high they stood in terms of combat on the 8th floor. And yet, this team was so easily being pushed to the edge by a monster parade. Once you were overwhelmed, there was no formation or strategy. Once chaos took over, there was no teamwork. Everyone was forced to fight alone. And in situations like this, quantity easily beat quality. This was why monster parades were so scary. Only those who could face hundreds of monsters alone would be able to survive. On top of that, no matter how skilled you were, human weapons such as bows and great swords were hard to use during such a chaotic fight. Monster parades were a bad fit for the majority of adventurers. Perhaps it wouldn't have been so bad if the monsters were much weaker. However, if the enemy was the same level or higher, then there was no hope of victory. That's why adventurers ran when there was a monster parade. There was nothing they could do but run. Of course, the monsters were attacking Haruki as well, and when they did, he used his 2 daggers to cut, block, and kill. Furthermore, Ria supported him by firing the potato stones. Quickly, he could still help them. So, hurry, move faster. But the wave of monsters was thick, and his attacks weren't fast enough. He wanted to help Shikama and the others, but it was all he could do to keep the monsters at bay. He couldn't break through the wall. It was like a nightmare. He felt horrible. Chapter 40.4 More. Haruki enlarged his detection awareness and was able to perceive every single monster in the area. Which monster was going to attack him at what speed? Which order should he tackle them? When should he dodge? He was able to find the best answer to the situation in an instant. The owners joined in. They were smarter. They were tougher. They were more dangerous. They could easily dodge simple attacks. That left you open. And they would launch a counterattack, and so he had to be careful. However, he couldn't allow the enemy to attack too many times either. Not yet. He could do more. He was aware of all of the monsters, and he observed, analyzed, and understood. He imagined the future and had it reflect on his movements. Silver wolves and owners had different levels of intelligence, and so he used different attacks for them. He did the least that was required when fighting the silver wolves and went all out against the owners. He cut, slashed, pierced, and kicked, guarded, dodged, and countered. Ooh ooh ooh. His roar sounded like a beast's howl, but it seemed to help erase the feeling of sickness that came over him from leveling up. He felt hot. His entire body was slightly numb. He felt that he would be able to move forever. He felt like he could fight forever. Maybe it was just the adrenaline. He was in a state of heightened excitement. He had goosebumps. He cut, slashed, parried, dodged, and kicked. When there was an opening, he would send the monsters flying into the air so they would land in a trap. There's no way you can get out of this. Silver wolves had torn Lars' arm and his sides. Haruki saw him close his eyes. Don't give up. If you give up, you'll no longer be able to think of anything. You had to move if you wanted a future. Despair need only exist in that very last moment. Grah. However, Haruki's voice did nothing. Before Lars could recover from his despair, a silver wolf tore out his throat. Blood sprayed thickly in the air. The dungeon suddenly smelled a lot more like iron. The man who had seemed so strong a short while ago had been killed so easily. The eyes that had been filled with hate and fear now turned dim. Lars. Shikama was desperately holding his shield up in resistance, but he shouted upon seeing Lars die. Of course, the silver wolves reacted to this noise, and they all turned to him at once. Haruki became frantic. A monster parade and stampede, and a stampede boss. He had been in pinches more than once before, and he had always managed to make it out alive, and he had assumed this time would be no different. However, after seeing that adventurer die, the shadow of despair was creeping towards him. Damn. What did we ever do? Shit, 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 shit. He used shield bash after shield bash to send the silver wolves flying. But just as Shikama pushed forward again with his shield, an owner's arm came swinging. It hit him right in the side of the head. His dark eyes rolled up in his head in an instant. Help and forgive. As for the archer, Haraya, he had already lost half of his body. There was no light in his eyes now. He wasn't seeing anything. Several silver wolves were biting into him, and every time his head shook, another piece of flesh was torn from his body. In less than 10 seconds, he completely lost his original form. Shikama and Lars were the same. The only thing that was left was pieces of leftover meat that were scattered all over the floor. And even that wouldn't remain for long either. The silver wolves were licking the ground neatly. Even though he was still fighting, Haruki was stunned. If he wasn't careful, his legs would give in under him. He couldn't help them. They had tricked Toiso and attacked Karen. He wasn't going to forgive them for that. However, he had still wanted to save their lives. He wanted to save any life that he could. He didn't want to see someone die in front of him ever again. It wasn't because of some lip service about all life being equal. It wasn't even about justice. It was just his own ego. But it was also Haruki's sense of responsibility. What he thought an adventurer should be. Without it, they would be just like the beasts. It was the last bit of pride as a human that he clung to. That was why Haruki had fought alongside them. Well, he had tried to, but what was gone could not be returned. The scene before him, the emotion, every detail, he would carve it into his heart, so that he would not make the same mistake again. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and then he switched gears. Ria, we're going to use everything we got to get out of here. Bleh. Ria shook her leaves disapprovingly. Still, she seemed to say, you really are hopeless. As she fired the potato stones in the direction that Haruki could not see. She really wasn't honest. Haruki chuckled, and then he focused on the monsters in front of him. Up until now, Ria had been restrained, as Shikama and the others were in the room, and now she was free. With every throw, a silver wolf fell as blood sprayed in the air. Haruki closed his eyes again. Then he bit his lip hard and charged into the group of monsters as he swung. He would suppress this horrible violence and trample over them. Novel by N. Com. Chapter 41.1. Let's show our presence. How much longer would the monsters continue to appear? He had been fighting for an hour already. Haha. No, it might have felt like an hour to Haruki, but it was really closer to 10 minutes. Thanks to the points he had put into strength and dexterity, Haruki was just barely able to avoid being crushed to death by the monsters. New novel chapters are published on. By raising detection, he was able to perceive attacks that were coming from blind spots. Furthermore, Raising growth acceleration meant that his level was slowly going up as well. Even the aspects that had been difficult when dealing with the monsters as first, were starting to become easier. And behind him, Rhea continued to annihilate the silver wolves with her rapid fire. Sometimes she would stop moving after feeling sick from leveling up, but she was still doing a great job. Haha. But it still wasn't enough. No matter how much they killed, more would continue to appear. They had killed so many already, and yet the overall number of enemies hadn't gone down at all. Perhaps it was despair that would crush them first. He could see the signs already. His throat hurt. It was getting harder to breathe. His body felt hot. He couldn't stop sweating. He was handling them. But things were slowly getting worse. Is this not a normal monster parade? There were clearly more monsters than the previous monster parade Haruki had encountered. They had defeated over 300 monsters already, and yet the end was nowhere in sight. If the corpses acted as a barricade to stop the monsters from advancing, it would make things a little easier while they fought. However, whenever Haruki would defeat a monster, the dungeon would quickly retrieve the body. It was just like a zombie attack. He thought that the dungeon was retrieving the dead monsters and sending them out again after reviving them. What should I do? What could he do? Haruki's head was hot as it operated at full speed. At the same time, he increased his detection range so that he wouldn't be attacked. Haruki's awareness covered all of the passages and targeted every single monster. It was all clearer than when he had 1 point in detection, and he was also able to tell their size without seeing them directly. With every last monster in his mind. In spite of the situation being so dangerous, Haruki was stunned. Kain. A silver wolf nearly bit him, but he was saved in the nick of time by Rhea's throw. What are you doing? Being lazy, Rhea seemed to say as she poked her leaves into his neck. Sorry, and thank you. Letting his guard down like that during battle was a mistake. Haruki apologized sincerely. However, it really wasn't his fault that he was so surprised. After all, how come I can sense a monster inside of the passage? Among the monsters he could sense with detection too, there was one that was inside of the wall. He had thought it must be some kind of mistake at first, but it wasn't. It was inside of the wall without a doubt. It seemed that there was a slight bump in the area where it would have been, as if a monster was going to be born from there soon. However, even after some time had passed, no monster came out of it. Maybe, Haruki muttered as he moved towards it. However, before he could reach the wall, 10 owners moved to block his path. If they were silver wolves, he could have gotten through them by brute force. But owners were different. Their combat ability was much higher, and they were also smart enough to be able to read your movement. Haruki's abilities would not allow him to get past 10 of them. As for Rhea's support, it was not promising. It was all that she could do to protect his back. So close. Haruki ground his teeth, as he just barely blocked the attacks of the owners. 1 step, 2 steps. They pushed him back. Don't back up anymore. It's dangerous. Rhea seemed to shout as she slapped his shoulder. Damn it. What can I? Just then, an idea suddenly formed in the back of Haruki's mind. But this is no time for hesitation. Haruki brushed away the feeling of disgust and quickly took off the mask. At the same time, he activated Conceal. The silver wolves continued to target him, just as before. As he was covered in sweat, he was not able to fool their detection abilities. However, it was different with the owners. They squinted their eyes and glared at the spot that he had been a moment ago. However, they were not able to see him. So, it was true. Previously, when he had used the fixed artillery during a stampede, the silver wolves had been the only monsters who were able to notice Haruki while he was concealed. And so he wondered if the owners would lose him if he used it. And he had been right. I can do this. And so Haruki ran at full speed, but still kept his guard up. As he approached the wall, then he took out his 2 daggers and stabbed it into the spot that he detected something. Just then, a low, heavy sound echoed throughout the dungeon. At the same time, Haruki suddenly felt tremendous pain pounding in the center of his head. GGG. Was it from leveling up? It was more painful than anything he had experienced before. Chapter 41.2. He could see sparks flying and lights exploding. Haruki felt that if he relaxed just a little, he would easily lose consciousness. And so he bit his lip hard in order to stay awake. His teeth pierced his lip. The pain was barely enough to keep awake. 10 seconds. 20 seconds passed, and then a severe sense of sickness slowly washed away. All right. In the meantime, The dungeon passage had not given birth to a single new monster, in spite of it doing it non-stop only a moment ago. Now he knew. There was no question about it. This was the one way that led to the answer. However, the passage in front of him was still filled with silver wolves and owners. There just weren't any new monsters being born. Rhea continued to blow off the heads of the silver wolves, and Haruki used conceal to get close to the owners and stab them in the heart with his daggers. One by one, the monsters began to fall, and still, they were not replaced. The hairs on his neck stood up. Finally, he had finally opened a road to survival. Now he just needed to fight with everything that he had. Haruki prepared to fight as he slowly put the mask back on. He would survive no matter what. He roared and then cut into the horde of monsters. They had been attacked by adventurers. Upon hearing this information, the special police were quick to move. They would not interfere if it was monsters, but they had no choice but to move when it came to adventurers. New novel chapters are published on. On top of that, the victim, that is to say, Oiso, the manager of a store that sold and bought materials, had told them the aggressor was an adventurer called Shikama. The special police had heard this name before. They had been arrested previously for assault, injury, and threatening. In spite of this, their sentence had been quite light. This was because they had negotiated and destroyed evidence, just in case they were caught. Without physical evidence, there were many victims who were forced to accept the results. Shikama and his men were the most infamous adventurers in all of Sapporo. On top of that, the special police had been told something from Masatsugu in secret. If they ever cause mischief, beat them without hesitation. Masatsugu's expression had been troubled. He must have felt a great responsibility in leaving them here. However, a most unexpected accident had occurred. The destruction of Shinjuku. And so it could not be helped that he could no longer look after them. And so the special police headed to the 8th floor immediately, in order to arrest the 3 men. However, they never would have guessed that a monster parade would be starting just as they arrived at the gate. They became frantic. They tried to activate the gate and return to the surface. However, there was one person among them who remained calm. It was the captain. He looked down at the slimy eels at their feet and realized that this place was safe. All of you, prepare your bows. He gave the order. But the others were still panicking. It didn't seem like they'd be able to attack properly. He would have to demonstrate first. And so the captain knocked an arrow and drew. Could you be careful so you don't accidentally hit me? Just as he was about to fire the arrow, a human voice sounded from the horde of monsters. The captain nearly unleashed the arrow right then, but he somehow stopped himself. After all, the voice had come from a creepy mask that floated in the air, and there was a monster plant behind it. Is that a devil? Inhuman. A human? The captain looked puzzled by the mask's reply. However, if he looked hard enough, he could see a faint outline of a body. It was barely visible. He would have believed it if he said he was a ghost. If you are a human, why are you carrying a monster? It's a friend. A friend? I tamed it. Indeed. The plant monster that was behind the masked man was attacking the other monsters as if to protect him. He wasn't lying or exaggerating, as the captain thought about the masked man's words. It's finally happened. Are you serious? Damn it. I wanted to be the first. The others started to shout excitedly. Taming a monster. It had been debated extensively whether or not this was even possible. Normal animals could be tamed, so there was no reason that a monster couldn't be tamed as well. In that case, there must be a way to tame a monster. As the special police, these men had licenses to be adventurers, and they also trained in the dungeon in order to be able to deal with adventurers. So their goal was also to conquer the dungeon, and of course, they also used the Let's website. In fact, when Masatsugu had come, they were so nervous that they ended up acting just like civilians. Some of them would come down to Chikaho when they were off work, and search the place with the hope of making new discoveries, and taming was one of the things they had been looking into. And now these adventurers who searched for the unknown, could not help but be very interested in this mystery man who had succeeded in taming a monster. Who are you? Surely, not with Shikama, are you? Number Haruki Karaboshi, Shikama's team. While he continued to fight the monsters, Haruki pointed at 3 different spots. There lay weapons and armor that had likely belonged to Shikama and his team. As special police and adventurers, it was not hard for them to be able to imagine what fate had awaited them. It was no wonder the special police knew of the horrors of a monster parade. If you got caught in one, you would die. But then, why was this Haruki still alive? He was in the middle of a monster parade, and yet he continued to hunt as if it was nothing. Who was this man? Chapter 41.3. The questions kept coming. Haruki was fighting with 2 daggers. They weren't the most popular or lethal weapons out there. Most people just equipped them because they liked them. However, when there were lots of monsters in a small area, and you had a limited space to swing, like in a monster parade, daggers were much easier to use, and unlike long swords and great swords, you could do multiple attacks in a short amount of time. Updated from novel by End.com. This would give you a great advantage during a monster parade. After thinking all of this, the captain could still not understand how Haruki was able to kill all those monsters with daggers that typically did very little damage. What's going on? Am I dreaming? Is that mask some kind of magic tool? Is it raising his strength? The captain wanted to support him with firepower. If they did, they might be able to save this man called Karaboshi. And more than anything, they would gain experience at a safe distance. They could hunt while working. It was the perfect opportunity. However, the passage leading out of the gate was so narrow, and they could not get a good view of what was going on. If they did fire, they might accidentally shoot him. Friendly fire was a possibility. When the captain realized this, he immediately ordered his men to put down their weapons. After they did so, they all started to talk about this man called Haruki Karaboshi. Even though there was a horde of monsters in front of them, they were quite relaxed now. This was also because of their ability as special police. They wouldn't die against monsters from the 8th floor, as long as they didn't charge in head first into the parade. Furthermore, the masked man seemed to be doing quite well, so they were able to stay calm and talk about him. The monsters don't seem to care about us at all. Is it because of that mask? I see. Maybe it's a magic item that attracts the attention of monsters. But, why would anyone wear something like that? What do you mean? Wearing it makes the monsters target you, right? Reminds me of some rancor. It might work well for a shield bearer. Ah, that's true, but I don't think this guy is a shield bearer. He seems like an assassin type, right? And his presence is so thin that you can't even see his body. Huh? So, why is he wearing that again? Don't ask me. I don't know. Still, he can tame monsters. So, you really can do it. That plant. It's protecting his back perfectly. Just having that thing means you can fight without having to watch your back. And it shoots with so much force. What a brilliant monster. I'm jealous. Oh, look. It's waving its leaves at us while it fights. Damn. It's cute. Shit. I really want one. And I worked so hard all of this time just to try and tame a silver wolf. Your hand got bitten so many times, and you still didn't give up. Yeah, I was thinking about quitting, but now that I know that it's possible, I'm going to stick to it a little longer. They muttered to each other. It was almost like listening to people talking during lunch break. They were not nervous at all. However, they still paid attention to the entrance. If even one single monster tried to step inside, then they would turn them into mincemeat in a flash. And as long as they were prepared to do that, there was no reason to be nervous. However, had there really been a man like this in Sapporo? There were other strong adventurers, yes, but they generally had a strong aura around them. As they were the people who guarded the gate, they were acquainted with everyone who was strong. They would meet them a lot as they passed through Chikaho, and often become friends. However, no one had an idea of who Haruki was. They had never even heard his name on the local message board. How could they have not noticed him, if he was this strong? As they continued to watch him fight, their bodies grew hotter and hotter. It wasn't that Haruki had incredible physical ability. He was at a level that allowed him to work on the 8th floor. But he was no match for police like them. And yet he was facing a monster parade. It was more that he was well suited for this fight, and less about strength. He was trying to go against the violence of numbers. But for the special police, it was a fight for territory. It was their territory, and he was heading towards certain victory. Could any adventurer not watch him and not feel a surge of emotion? Yes, kill them. Hurrah! Ah, oh, that it was close. Another one is coming. Before they knew it, they were supporting Haruki with words instead of weapons. Normally, it would have been right for them to move out of there and help Haruki. However, they fought with bows, long swords, and great swords. Such weapons were not a good match for monster parades. They would not be that much use if they joined the fray. Of course, they could just rely on their strength and fight with brute force. However, that would likely lead to hurting Haruki or each other. And even though they had stepped foot into the center layers, they were not skilled enough to be able to stay aware of each other while fighting in a monster parade. Ah! Just then, One of them raised their voice. I just remembered. He's that weirdo with the mask. There were rumors. Yes, thought the captain. Stories about a masked man had indeed come up recently. As he had been talking with Masatsugu, it was rumored that he must be in a team that was close to being rankers. I see, so this is the much talked about, masked pervert. It was just as Haruki had finished killing all of the monsters, that he heard those words, and he fell weakly to his knees. Chapter 42.1 Let's solidify a new resolve. By the time Haruki returned from the dungeon, 3 hours had passed since Oiso escaped to the surface. While much of her time had been taken up for questioning, it could not be helped, as the aggressors were not present. As he had not expected the special police to be watching him fight, Haruki was shocked when he first realized it. Would they assume that he had murdered Shikama and the others? Or perhaps he would lose his credibility as an adventurer because he was carrying Ria on his back. However, when he told them the honest truth, they accepted it quite willingly. But they had already been thinking that monster taming was bound to happen one of these days. And so Haruki was relieved to find that they were open-minded people. He picked up the slimy eels, which were no longer very potent, and then headed for the materials store. Well, Kohu, why were they always surprised? Haruki narrowed his eyebrows as he stepped into the store. Karaboshi, has Oiso returned yet? Mr. Karaboshi. Yes, go to the back. The clerk directed him, and so Haruki went to the back room where he found Oiso looking crestfallen as she sat on a chair. Karen was sleeping on a pile of blankets next to her. Is Karen alright? Oh, it's you, Karaboshi. Why did they always act so surprised? What? Could you please put that eel down? It's so gross. Oh, right. So this was the reason. Haruki threw the eels into a trash can. Oiso then gave him a dissatisfied look. Apparently, she was not happy that he had thrown it away in their store. However, it wasn't as if he had anywhere else to put it, so she would just have to accept it. So, how's Karen? She just has the lacerated wound on her back. As I had some medicine for that, the wound is now completely closed. Karaboshi? Karen suddenly sat up when Haruki came closer to her. However, her expression immediately contorted with pain, and she fell back down. Miss Karen, you shouldn't move so suddenly like that. Is there a problem? Haruki felt a chill go down his spine. A great sword has hit her in the back. Maybe it had done more than surface level damage. She was kicked in the jaw, which caused a concussion, and she lost a lot of blood. Oh, right. A person's back, especially the center, have numerous nerves concentrated there. And that was where Karen had been cut. For a moment, he had been scared that there would be long-lasting effects. So he was relieved to hear that it was just blood loss. Haruki touched his chest and sighed. The centipede breastplate that Karen had been wearing was now sitting next to her. The part that had been protecting her back was cut open. That's how powerful last attack had been. It was a miracle that it hadn't done more damage. I'm sure that the armor cracking like that resulted in reducing the impact of the blow. I see. Whoever made that armor was clearly a very skilled crafter. Though, it was also possible that Garen's luck skill had played a part in it. When Haruki finished telling them what had happened in the dungeon, Oiso looked at him sympathetically. I never would have guessed there would be a monster parade. It's amazing that you're still alive. Well, Haruki wasn't sure how to feel about those words. He had survived the monster parade, but Shikama and the others had died. What if there had been another way? When he started to think about it, his own mistakes seemed to be magnified, and it put him in a dark mood. Oiso must have guessed what he was thinking, and so she spoke to him firmly. There is no need for you to feel bad about it. But it's just karma. What you do, whether it is good or bad, will come back to you. And today, they paid for their many sins. You really shouldn't feel guilty about it. Besides, you will also get your just deserts. But unlike them, it will be something good. Thanks. When he left the store, all of Sapporo City was red. He walked through it at a leisurely pace. Karen watched Haruki's back and bit her lip. Updated from novel by N.com. It hadn't been that long since they first met, and yet she had come to understand his personality. Haruki seemed complicated, but he was surprisingly rather simple. He was clearly terribly depressed now, and the deaths of Shikama and the others was the reason. There was no need to save such immoral people. Oiso had said something to that effect, and Karen agreed. However, Haruki thought differently. He wanted to save any life that was in reach, whether good or bad. He believed that that was what the occupation of adventurer entailed. Had he not been like that, he would not have charged into a monster parade. when everyone else was running away, just to save a stranger like her. He wouldn't have faced a stampede without fearing for his own safety. It was because Karen understood all of this about him that she bit down on her own lip. So, she was part of the reason that he was feeling so down. Had she been more observant, she might have noticed that Shikama and the others were approaching them. Then she wouldn't have been attacked in the back. If Karen hadn't been wounded, Haruki would not have had to fight them alone. At least, the burden of their lives wouldn't have only been on him. Haruki had used his skill board to strengthen her, and this was the result. It really was embarrassing. She had caused trouble for him once again. No matter how hard she tried and how careful she was, in the end, she couldn't fool anyone. The more she moved, the more she missed. It was sad. She was angry and humiliated. Tears welled up in her eyes. This time, she had been so excited about it as well, and that made it hurt all the more. Karaboshi, I'm sorry. Haruki heard Karen apologize from behind him, and he stopped in his tracks. Her drooping shoulders were shaking weakly. Why are you sorry? Because I'm useless. If I wasn't through this wouldn't have. Oh, stop talking nonsense, or I'll punch you. Chapter 42.2 You already did. No. It was just a chop. Then Haruki rubbed Karen's forehead. Ooh. Karen pulled away and looked at him with tear-filled angry eyes. It's them that attacked us without provocation. You can't take the blame for their crimes. Besides, Haruki lowered his back so he could look Karen straight in her eyes. My guard was down. I knew that it was possible that they might come, and yet I wasn't ready. I wasn't a good scout, and so it was my fault that you got hurt. You're wrong. I was the rear guard. If only I had seen them coming. You wouldn't have been hurt if I was stronger. Had I had the resolve, they wouldn't have died. Haruki had been smoldering within for a while now, and his emotions came pouring out from his mouth. Ever since he had acquired the skill board, he had been trying his hardest. Or he had believed that he was. He was using his abilities to the fullest. However, there had still been more that he could do. Had he maxed out growth acceleration in the beginning, he might have been strong enough by now to have saved them. That being said, he had never considered raising their skills as a way of saving them. Haruki had no intention of pardoning them, but saving them and pardoning them were completely different things to him. It was an adventurer's job to protect lives. If he couldn't save those who were right in front of him, he was like a printer that couldn't print. He was useless. He wasn't an adventurer. He had to save people, even if they were criminals. That was his job, and so he wanted to save. But if he was so fixated on that, then Haruki should have considered raising their skills as an option. Maybe he should have been more reckless. The business of saving lives was not as simple as he had thought. Perhaps what he had been lacking was the willingness to go one step further. Karen could use the rare skill that was magic, and Haruki had the even rarer skill board. With these two things, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be the target of Sumion's malice. Even if you caused no trouble, it had a way of finding you. Just like this time. The hatred had been one-sided. If he couldn't deal with that malice, then he was still too inexperienced. He couldn't blame anyone if they called him that. He didn't want to make the same mistake again, and so he would do everything in his power to prevent it. He would save every life that was in his reach, or he would become strong enough that anyone with ill intentions towards him would think twice before facing him. Yes, Haruki was resolved to do it. In order for him to become stronger, in order to gain the power to protect his friends. Me too. If I was stronger, you wouldn't have been in such danger. You wouldn't have had to suffer alone as I. Tears fell from Karen's eyes as Haruki took her hand and squeezed it. Let's get stronger then, together. Yes. Hard cow force. Traverse the dungeon at full power. 157th floor Purveyor, 65 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. I found him. That masked guy that there have been rumors about. 66 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. Really? What was he like? Did you talk to him? 67 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. A cursed mask that floats in the air. A plant on his back. Tentacle hands. 68 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. What kind of monster? 69 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. He's not a monster. At least, he was using an card. Novel by N. Com, I think. 70 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. You don't sound so confident. Lol. So, did you talk to him? 71 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. As if I could. That guy is dangerous. I would have great respect for anyone who could approach him. 72 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. That bad? Huh. Maybe you have to be as strong as Masatsugu to get close. 73 name. Anonymous frontline challenger. Well, that rules me out. Lol. Enjoy Force, a thread to discuss Chikaho 70 alive. 110 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. Latest information, I found the taming skill. 111 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. Seriously? Tell me more. 112 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. I don't know the details. I just saw someone who was able to tame a monster. 113 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. 112 Damas. Gather more information before you come here. Well, I've been trying for a long time, but keep failing. You probably need a magic item, right? 114 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. So, who is this person that succeeded? 115 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. I can't tell you, because you'll be able to identify the person. But this guy seemed really dangerous. 116 name, Anonymous who enjoys Chikaho. Wait, are you talking about the masked man? Definitely. A thread for Monster Parade reports 422 extinct. 21 name, praying for a Monster Parade to hit normies. I heard there was a Monster Parade in Chikaho. 22 name, praying for a Monster Parade to hit normies. Yeah, and the masked man annihilated it. 23 name, praying for a Monster Parade to hit normies. Mask? Annihilate? I thought it scattered. Which floor was this? I heard that it was on the 10th floor. 24 name, praying for a Monster Parade to hit normies. Huh? No, it's the 8th floor. 25 name, praying for a Monster Parade to hit normies. What? The road to becoming a noticeable being. I found it! Exclamation mark. Hello, it's Aero. I have been searching through Chikaho after accepting a quest, and today, I've completed it. Oh, I'm so happy to be alive. Greater than underscore. And then I killed a lot of monsters after it, and leveled up a lot. I might be able to go to the central layers soon. However, there are things that I feel I have to improve on as well. This whole experience reminded me that I'm still a beginner. Maybe I was getting a little ahead of myself. Underscore carrot. I have to get much stronger. Greater than underscore. But it seems that I'll be free for about 3 weeks. So I'm going to level up. I worked hard leveling up today as well. Now, perhaps I've taken another step closer to a future of having a presence. Maybe. As always, his blog had 3 visitors. However, after about 4 hours passed from his update, he saw that he had 2 new visitors, and he had 5 page views. Furthermore, when he checked his blog the next day, he saw that he had been bookmarked again. Now that was 4 bookmarks. Yes. Haruki was so happy that he started to dance on top of his hotel bed. Could this mean that his presence had been strengthened? Haruki was so excited that he ran out into town without his mask. However, no one noticed him at all. Apparently, the road to strengthening his presence was still very long.